Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you enjoy this legal educational content, and today may be the day I earn your subscription. For today's story, we are doing a reaction video to a trio of mental health professionals who'd like to offer that they know something about law. How exciting. So these mental health professionals are discussing the Kyle Rittenhouse case and they're analyzing it. And coming to some conclusions about things. Now, I mean, they're more expert than me than mental health, I guess. So if they want to talk about people's psychology or motivations, okay, to some degree. But if they're going to talk about law, hey, we're in my house. So we're going to analyze this thing and we're going to react to it. It's 2.5 hours long. We're picking this up at about the 10-minute mark. The reason for that being is that the first couple, I apologize, about the 8-minute mark, I should say. The reason for that being that the first 8 minutes or so are just setting things up, just kind of previewing, introducing the hosts and so forth and so on. So pick this up at about the 8-minute mark and see what happens. So let's, do that thing. So here's our trio of mental health providers, and we see that they've got 3 people arranged at 3 circular desks, all with various kitsch on them of varieties, and behind the one guy they've got a cork board with string together ideas and stuff. I assume it's a joke and not serious, but just an observation about how things are starting here with our trio of mental health providers. Okay.
But by and large, when somebody's found not guilty, it's done. You have to let it go. You can't even really file other charges to try to get revenge. That's frowned upon. So
it's not so much frowned upon as illegal. When you charge part of a crime, you have to charge all the crime. So you can't charge part of a crime and then come back with a different part of the same crime. So what we sometimes say in law, how we phrase this, is you have to charge everything related to the criminal transaction. So that's the sequence of things that are related to the crime. And what that exactly means is obviously defined by law. But you can have a group of things that occurred at disparate times. But as long as they're all related to the same underlying purpose, for example, and they're closely related in time and purpose, then you have to charge them together. So if you don't charge an element of it, you can't. It's illegal. That counts as double jeopardy too, by the way. So if you don't bring that charge, and you could have brought that charge, then it's gone. So not so much frowned upon as a constitutional violation. We're off to a really good start here.
Not guilty. He's done. Not guilty. He's walking. Now there could be civil liability.
Sure.
Well, I was going to say I was reasonably sure there would be, but I'm not sure anybody is going to sue.
I don't think that I don't think there's anything that they would get by suing.
Yeah.
Although in a civil court, I'm sure that he would be found responsible.
It's 51%. It's a lot different standard preponderance of the evidence. So let's many people are familiar with this case, but let's do a brief summary to get started. Kind of get the whole case in the one package.
Oh, Joy! Please tell us the summary of the story.
Because this was requested. No. I had to do it. I think that was a perfect suggestion.
Do it. It's your job.
I think the comment was it had to be a cheeky no, I think is what it was. We obviously have a lot of European or English viewers, so I was thankful for that comment. So so what started all of this, August 23rd, 2020, Jacob Blake is shot in the back 4 times by a white police officer in Kenosha. And Jacob Blake, of course, is black, and he was paralyzed from the waist down as a result. So there was protests after that, peaceful.
Would you like to give us some other facts about Jacob Blake and why he might have been shot by the police officer? He had a knife in his hand. He had children in his car that he didn't have the right to have in his car. He was basically kidnapping the kids. He had a knife in his hand. And as he opened the door to get into his car where the kids were available, the police shot him because now he posed a threat to the kids after giving him warnings, and incidentally also after trying a taser. So they tried less lethal options and it didn't work. Also, they were called there because he was in violation of a restraining order, and the woman called him because the restraining order. So the police came to enforce this restraining order which I guess is super bad. The police aren't supposed to enforce restraining orders, but they did, and they came, and the guy had a knife, and he was a threat, so they shot him. We could mention that, but no, it's just white police officer shoots black guy. We're not going to go into any details that might help inform us as to why that occurred.
At first, and ultimately violent demonstrations occurred in Kenosha for days afterwards. So on August 25th, 2 days later, is when we see Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha. My understanding, and this may not be entirely true, but my understanding is he responded or saw a post on social media that brought him over there. The post was about just patriots arming themselves, defending Kenosha, things like that. Kyle would say in an interview later that day that I believe he said it was his job to defend Kenosha, or to defend the area. So he was going there to protect businesses. He had earlier that day had spoken to a business owner of a car dealer, a used car dealership, and had asked. It was just
Such a lucky guy.
right, let down. Yeah,
What?
Could have been you. He could have called you.
had just been there, and there was some damage to the cars, and was just talking to this business owner and saying, "Oh, this is terrible, whatever," and had asked him, or implied anyway, that he might need some protection for these cars. There was a text message sent by Kyle to this guy. It was the son of the owner of the business, I believe. Kyle had sent him a message and asked about it, but there was no response in that message. So Kyle goes over there expecting to defend this car lot because he felt like that was his responsibility.
He went with a friend.
He went with a friend.
Well, it wasn't strictly speaking his responsibility. I mean, he didn't have to do it. He was being asked by the people to do it, and he had lawful permission to be there. He had lawful permission to be on that property. I mean, it wasn't his responsibility. It wasn't his property. He could have said no. He's not an employee. He's not a contractor. So it's not an obligation. But he's invited onto the property for the purposes of protecting the property. And he says, I'd like to help you with that purpose and goal. So, whether or not he felt some sort of broader civic responsibility in some sort of broader sense, but whether he strictly speaking had the responsibility in that moment, no. He didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to go clean the graffiti. He didn't have to go clean the streets. He didn't have to help repair the damage. He didn't have to help guard the businesses. He could have chosen not to do any or all these things. But he did. So, those are lawful behaviors. Okay.
Right. Expecting to protect this car lot. So, of course, there was a curfew, so no one was really supposed to be out there to begin with. But Kyle was out there.
A curfew, incidentally, that already has, by a different independent court, been termed to be illegal. So it wasn't a question. Well, it kind of was a question because the state failed to prove its legality. So, but in a different case, in a different court in Kenosha, it was actually proven to be illegal. So it was not a valid order. So there's that.
He and his friend had found some other groups of armed individuals and joined in with them more or less. Not that they knew each other necessarily before that, but joined in. And there was a lot of people, of course, out there. So the night, we'll go into the details, of course, but the night ended with 36-year-old Joseph Rosenbaum being shot by Kyle Rittenhouse. And then people were chasing him. 26-year-old Anthony Huber had hit Kyle with a skateboard, and Kyle had fatally shot him. And then the last one was Gage Grosskreutz. He was running towards Kyle. Kyle shot him, but it was not a fatal shot. It shot him in the right arm.
Running towards him with?
And the Joseph
gun?
Rosenbaum was not armed. Anthony Huber had a skateboard, had hit him, and then Gage Grosskreutz was armed. So those are the general details. Of course, we know that he was found not guilty in the trial.
Right.
That was just announced today. I actually didn't look specifically, but I didn't hear anything about any demonstrations that were occurring in Kenosha
Yeah,
I
I
know
checked
there
right
was-
before we started and said everything was clear.
Okay. I know that there was some protests, outside the courthouse and what have you, but hopefully that's not the case. Of course, people can be upset about it, and that's perfectly fine. But demonstrating about it in a violent way, of course, would be counterproductive.
Yeah, I know this case has a lot of eyes on it for a lot of different reasons, and there's a lot of heavy emotions invested in it. And I think, honestly, unfairly. I think because of the connection it has to the Black Lives Matter movement and the
Wait, all right, this is going to be some BS, I'm pretty sure. He says emotions are connected to it and perhaps unfairly, which sounds like he's about to make a logical appeal. I mean, that's kind of what you would think, right? Emotions are invested into this and perhaps unfairly because we should be looking at this from a position of reason, someone might say, as the next part of that sentence. But he's about to say it's wrong because its connection to BLM, not because of the emotions are not compatible with the logical reality. Okay.
the difference between police and the systemic racism that's built into the system. That's gotten to be really a big part of what people are seeing in this case. But honestly, it's peripheral. And it can.
What's systemic racism in this case? I mean, I'm up for the argument. But what from these cases, either the Blake incident or Rittenhouse, did we learn about systemic racism? Where is the systemic racism in these cases? Was it systemically racist for the police to respond to a call from a black woman to stop Black because Jacob Black because of the no contact order and the restraining order? Was it systemically racist for the judge to issue that restraining order? Systemically racist for the police to come? Systemically racist for the police to note that there are children in the car that he's interfering with and aren't supposed to be there? Systemically racist for them to note a knife? Systemically racist for them to note he's heading into the car with a knife where children are now present? Systemically racist for them to shoot him because of the ongoing threat after warning him after trying less than lethal means? Which part of that was systemically racist? I'm confused. In the Rittenhouse case, which part of it was systemically racist? When the police were not there and were pulled back by the mayor because of Black Lives Matter saying, hey, let's defund the police, and so the police weren't there? Are you arguing it's systemically racist for the police to not be there? Or are you arguing it's systemically racist for the police to be there? Or both? I don't know. Was it systemically racist when Rittenhouse shot 3 white people who were posing active, ongoing threats after death threats and stuff like that? Was that the systemically racist part? Was it systemically racist when they arrested him and tried him and put him on trial and all the rest of the things? Where's the systemic racism that's coming from these things? Please show me the systemic racism.
Point out a lot of areas where the system is flawed, and where there is some of the systematic racism or systemic racism. Like if Kyle Rittenhouse had been black, would he have been acquitted?
Hopefully.
I mean, there are many people who would say,
although
if he was black, he would have been convicted.
I don't know. I couldn't say for sure. Obviously. But I feel like there's at least a decent chance that if Kyle Rittenhouse had been black, he might not have been charged. I couldn't say that for sure, especially if it were a black person shooting black people, right? So we have to, potentially take race out of the equation. So if Kyle Rittenhouse were black and all the people he shot were black, would the case have been brought if everything else was the same? So if literally the only thing we're changing are the people's skin color involved and everything else is the same, would Kyle Rittenhouse still have been charged? I don't know, man. I feel like a large part of the reason he was charged was because, white people suck or something, according to the narrative. Not 100% convinced on that one.
Of murder, no matter whether if the events were exactly the same.
And wouldn't have been able to walk past the police like he did
right
at the end when he was appearing to surrender, had his arms up.
Yeah.
I'm not
I
sure
mean,
why
that's
not.
one of the biggest moments that the media showed, like when it first happened, right? Like that.
I'm not sure why that wouldn't have been true if it had been black. It seemed like the police were telling literally everyone to get out of there. And he's just another guy. And they seen lots of people with firearms that day. So the police had no particular reason to believe that he was a shooter at that particular moment. He had his hands up, which could mean a whole bunch of things. But it's not inherently obvious that police made that decision because of skin color, as opposed to just saying, well, we literally need to get the scene secured. Everyone needs to leave. So we're just literally giving the order to everyone, and they didn't know anything about the shooting. Or the knowledge they had was very minimal at the time. So, it could be that.
That's the big picture, is like Kyle Rittenhouse, hands up, AR-15 across his chest, walking towards police, and police just rolling on past him. Like, this kid has just shot 3 people, and police have a call for an active shooter in that area. They see a kid walking towards him with hands up and a gun, and they just roll on past. Like, Kyle was not arrested that night. He turned himself in the next day.
in Illinois.
Yeah.
Well, he turned himself in like an hour later or something.
I think this is a case where there's not a lot of room for projection, but
What?
people have projected anyway.
Right. Because it has a peripheral connection to a very divisive political stance and very divisive topic in general. But this case is actually, when you look into it, it's not about that. It has very little to do with that at all.
It's actually a stunningly simple case, considering how complex it looks like when you first look at it. You got 3 different people. I think he fired 8 shots, because he claims he fired 2 shots at somebody and didn't strike them, if I'm not mistaken. But there is no complaining witness, I guess, for that.
Right.
So 6 shots fired that impacted a human.
Yeah.
And, have the protests or riots, depending on, political camp, I guess.
No, I
I mean, I would think the difference between protests and riots is protests don't imply destruction of property or violence or lawlessness, because it's lawful to protest. Riots kind of imply looting and arson and violence and things like that. So the distinction for me is the actions that occurred. I have no particular problem if people want to go protest for any cause they like. I might disagree with their protest. I might disagree with their cause. I might want to protest in opposition to them, which is my First Amendment right. But I don't have any problem with them speaking their mind, because that's what we do in society. So the distinction for me is not who's doing it, but what are they doing?
always look at it as like there were protests during the day, and then they became riots. That's what 90% of the time happened with riots in most cities. It was there's relatively peaceful protests, and then there's escalation, either because police escalate, or because the police become present, and then protesters escalate. And then once the escalation happens, the looters and the rioters come out of the woodwork and go, chaos, and they start throwing things and burning things, and it becomes complete and total chaos.
Yeah, and that's where Kenosha was at that point. You had looting, you had people setting things on fire. I think it was Joseph Rosenbaum who actually set a trailer on fire, and the prosecutor was talking about how he wanted to convict him for that, but he was dead. So, and of course, Rosenbaum had a terrible criminal history, like really bad. You know, we won't go into all the detail, but it was bad. And Huber had a pretty bad criminal history too. Yeah. You know, kicking a minor, strangling a minor. These are not nice people.
They are not nice people. That's true.
Kreutz, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's a little different. He seemed to be more helpful. He had like medical gear, and he went to many riots, but he was technically carrying a gun without a valid permit.
This is true.
He let it lapse. But I'm not aware of any other criminality. And it's not clear if that would be a crime or one of those things where you just have to renew it, like if you give a grace period.
Mm-hmm. No, it was a crime. It was suspended because of an ongoing case. So it was suspended by court action. So I'm pretty sure there's no grace period involved in that. But incidentally, whether or not he was carrying the gun illegally is irrelevant to a potential self-defense claim, as I've described before, right? It would be the same thing true for Kyle. Like, even if we assumed that Kyle's gun was illegal, which we know it wasn't, but even if it was, it wouldn't impact the self-defense analysis because they're two different charges, right? Being in possession of an illegal gun does not negate a self-defense claim. It also doesn't negate the possession with an illegal gun claim. They're just two different things, right? So we've had actual cases with actual felons in actual possession of actual guns who've used them in lawful self-defense. And those cases, yeah, the murder charge disappears because the fact they're in legal possession is irrelevant. Not so much with the gun possession charge, which leads to its own set of problems, but yeah, so he was in illegal possession of a firearm, but it wouldn't negate a self-defense claim, so okay.
Most states do not give you a grace period for that. But I'd also be surprised if somebody got caught doing that, they would actually be convicted. I mean, it's pretty Mickey Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have a permit, they trusted you, and if you let it expire, it's not like it's passive.
Sure.
Right.
It wasn't just that he let it expire, though. You know, if it wasn't just that he let it expire, in which case we'd be a lot more sympathetic. It was suspended by court order, which is a little bit different than expiring, in my view, at least.
It's very, and it can be like, oh, I wasn't aware that it had expired. Can I renew it?
It's like these state line violations where people they forget that they're driving out of state and their gun is with them.
Mm-hmm.
New Jersey is the only place I've ever heard of that will convict people for that, because New Jersey is like a different planet, different galaxy. You know, I think it was a woman in Philadelphia who crossed over, like Ben Franklin or whatever, into New Jersey, and I forget what happened, but somehow there's a police interaction, and they found that she had this gun. She had a permit in Pennsylvania, and I believe they convicted her, or
they
tried to, because they have a rule against hollow point cartridges.
They did arrest her. They did convict her. The Governor Christie had to eventually pardon her. Not a great moment in New Jersey history, in my opinion. But yeah, this woman was just on the wrong side of the turnpike, pulled over by New Jersey police, found with a firearm. She was arrested. She was convicted. I believe she was serving time. And then eventually the governor pardoned her because the whole thing was kind of BS. So yeah, that happened. And I don't know that that's the only state that would do that, but it definitely happened in that state. There's also another one, which is just about as bad, dealing with a person who was flying from state to state and their plane accidentally landed in New Jersey. And that's an interesting story too, but let's press on.
Hollow point bullets. Yeah. So either way, Gage Gross Kurtz seems like an exception. The extensive criminal histories would be,
right,
or any criminal history would be Rosenbaum and Huber. So you have a very stark view, right? I think this is one of these cases that polarized pretty clearly. People on the right see Rittenhouse as a hero,
poster child of
yeah,
what they believe,
fighting the rioters, restoring order to a lawless Wisconsin, and the liberals who look at Rosenbaum and Huber as misunderstood criminals who were trying to get their lives back on track that very night.
Rosenbaum is a misunderstood criminal trying to get his life on board. Rosenbaum with the multiple convictions of forcible assault in a prurient way on children. He's just trying to get his life together. Really, that guy? Okay.
And happened to encounter a, cop wannabe or Navy SEAL wannabe or whatever, who mowed them down with what they would probably say is a fully automatic weapon when it was not.
It's not. Now, I will say I'm kind of left-leaning myself.
You don't say.
Quite literally right now. But and I do look at Kyle Rittenhouse and say some of those same things. He was a police wannabe.
He was, I think so.
He was a police explorer. He was a cadet with the fire department.
Yeah, it was fire department, right? Not police.
Right. No, he had been a police explorer as well.
Oh, he had been police and fire department.
He was police explorer and he was a cadet with the fire department.
It's like a classic sensation seeker.
Yeah, he's a very.
Or it's a guy who is young and thinking about going into police or fire department, it's not exactly unheard of for someone to become a police officer when they're 18. I remember a case even in Maryland where it was 17. And they had to get like special permission and shit because, they're carrying a handgun and stuff like that. But it's in the performance of their duties. But yeah, we had a 17-year-old police officer once in Maryland, and people calling the police because like this person's so young. But I don't remember exactly how that came about, but that's the thing that happened. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, she was a licensed police officer, so does it matter? Not really. In any case, young people sometimes want to join the police department. Sometimes when people become 18, they want to join the fire department or join the police department or become a medic or some combination thereof. And he's doing some advanced work before he becomes 18 to figure out if that's a good idea for him, which sounds like a really good idea to me. I mean, if you came to me and you're like, hey, I'm a 16-year-old, I'm a 15-year-old, I'm thinking when I become 18, I might want to be a police officer, I might want to be a nurse, I might want to be a whatever. I'd say, is there any opportunity for you to try to figure out what that actually looks like in reality? Some way for you to explore that? And if there's these formalized programs at the fire department for this fire department cadet or police department explorer or whatever they call it, and it's some opportunity to dip your toe into the waters to see whether or not that's the right career for you. Is it really something you want? Like, that seems like a really good idea. How about we dip our toe into the water and we find out a little bit about what that might be like and find out, geez, is it all just, a fantasy, or is it all like idealized, or is this really the life I want to live? So to me, it seems extremely prudent for a person who's looking at doing that. Let me see what that might be like. Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm not sure why that's a problem.
High thrill seeker, and that's where I think like he was a police wannabe. Like that's why he went to Kenosha. That's why he made the statement about it's our job to protect it, because he really was. And to the side of the right, he was trying to be a police officer. He was trying to fight for liberty and fight to restore order. The problem is that wasn't his job.
Right, but then
he was not a police officer.
The other argument would be that the rioters weren't doing their job either, which was not to riot.
Yeah.
So is the answer?
Well, the one is like him wanting to, it's not Kyle's job. That's true. Which goes to it's not his duty, which I agreed with you earlier. It's not his obligation. I agreed with you earlier. But he wants to help. He wants to help the community be better. So, good. And it's not so much that it wasn't the job of the rioters, because to the best of my knowledge, there is no job called rioter. I don't know who hires them or pays them because it's illegal. So, not so much their job as they have an active duty not to do those things. So, kind of different in my view.
And this is, I think, at the core of the question for a lot of people, is the answer to lawlessness for people like Rittenhouse, or even people older and more mature and,
right,
to just stay home and hide? That's I think at the heart. I think that's what people believed. Some people believe the verdict answered.
I'm of two minds with it when it comes to Rittenhouse, though, because there's an aspect where I'm like, okay, he did have some good intentions, and if he had voiced those intentions as a priority, then I wouldn't even be like, I would be like in the camp of it was completely self-defense. If he had said, I'm here with my med kit to, render aid to anybody who needs it. I'm here to tend to wounds because, that's why I'm here. I just have this gun for self-defense because I know it's dangerous out there. Yeah. I would have been like, it was self-defense 100% of the time. But
isn't that, kind of exactly what happened? Kyle didn't use those precise words, I guess, but he was going around saying, medic, anyone need a medic, and the evidence, to the degree it exists, shows that Kyle was treating, in fact, everybody. So if he had been around saying, hey, look, I'm here to be a medic and I'm here to provide for everyone. The gun is only to protect me, but I'm here to provide everyone. I would have said 100% self-defense. What do you mean if? What do you mean if? Isn't that kind of exactly what Kyle was doing, running around saying does anyone need help? Anyone need help? Providing help to everybody? What do you mean if? What are we talking about?
The fact that he said it's our job to protect this business means he was acting as a police. He was trying to act as law enforcement, not as a person rendering aid to others. And he even
Why not both? Why not both? Why can't you do both? Why can't you be there to protect property and provide aid to others? Are we to understand that if you're there only to provide aid, then it's clearly self-defense, but if you're there to provide aid and help protect a business, whoa, suddenly it's not clearly self-defense anymore.
been used some of the police jargon when he said it. He's like, I'm going to put myself in harm's way.
Right. And Grosskreutz was trying to help people, and he concealed his weapon. Maybe he shouldn't have been because of the permit issue, but he didn't look like he was trying to say, hey, look at me, I have a gun.
Yeah. He wasn't in paramilitary kind of outfit. Like that was the olive green shirt and the cargo camo pants with the 1-point harness. There's not much more tactical than that, other than putting on a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, a helmet.
Which he had, but he gave to a friend. Like, I'm not going to need it.
Are we actually going to the way Kyle dressed? Are we going down that road? Are we going down that road? Kyle is not validly there to protect others. Kyle's not validly there to render aid because of the fact he's wearing paramilitary gear in this olive green. Because Kyle Rittenhouse was wearing a really short skirt and revealing clothing. Because he was wearing a really short skirt and revealing clothing, then he was asking for the trouble. Are we seriously going down that road, guys? Because of what he was wearing, it changes the analysis? What are we doing over here, guys? Are we serious? Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's it's important for everyone, but part of our job as counselors is to be unbiased, right? And so I think that plays a lot into things like this.
I really think it's to check our bias, not to be unbiased, but to check our bias.
Fair enough. But
you might want to check harder. You might want to check harder.
To separate our personal feelings toward Kyle from, having his right to have a fair trial. Right. And so, I don't really like Kyle. I don't think he stands for a lot of good things. I don't think he should have been there. I don't think he should have had a weapon. I don't think he should have been. I don't think he had any right to have it. I think they could have challenged that law, like the kind of loophole that they found, more or less. And I don't think he should have been there. But at the end of the day,
what do you mean they could have challenged it? What do you mean they could have challenged that law? They could have challenged that loophole. What do you think the prosecutor was trying to do? The prosecutor was trying to do exactly that. What do you mean they could have tried? What do you mean they could have tried to fight that loophole? The prosecutor did. They brought the charge. They argued every way possible to bring it. They did exactly that. And then the law says what it says, which I'd like to point out just as a matter of legal education. The criminal law is to be narrowly construed. That's because the criminal law makes things illegal, and we want to narrowly construe it because when the legislature writes something, any ambiguity goes in favor of the defense, right? Also called the rule of lenity. We read it narrowly. We read it leniently. So, yeah, right. So we read the law strictly. And this is what the law said. So they did try to challenge it. I remember it. I remember that happening.
If we can look at him in a more unbiased way, I think it helps everyone and not attach emotions to it. But I can also understand people that get very emotional about it, right? People that would say, well, here's another situation where there was some kind of race-based thing attached to it. Not that Kyle necessarily had anything to do with that directly. Maybe did. I don't know. But here's another race-based thing that somebody just gets off, and it's attached to a race-based thing. And
It's a race-based thing. Even though Kyle didn't have any attachment to that, I don't know. But it was race-based. So he's confused, or I'm confused. One of us is confused. On the one hand, he says, I don't know if Kyle was attached to that. Maybe he was. But then, despite his lack of assurance, he then goes on to conclude that this is a race-based thing. So his lack of assurance doesn't preclude him from concluding it was, which seems like a weird thing. All right.
And I'm sure there's more than a few people that were sitting and saw that, heard that verdict, and were like, "Yeah, I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to be like that, because that's what we've seen in the past, specifically attached to the racial aspect of that." But separating,
I don't know what racial aspect he said. He seems to be implying that because Kyle was white, that's the reason the verdict came the way it was. And I mean, there's no part of the statute that has anything to do with race. So I mean, I can't say, maybe they wouldn't have brought the case if it was black on black or even black on white. I don't know. But there's nothing about the race here. We just looked at the evidence. We looked at the photos. We looked at the videos. We looked at the timing of everything. We never looked at the race. And this is one of the things, for example, in the Ahmaud Arbery shooting, that Nate and I were getting so frustrated about from some people in the chat, because it seemed to us that some people in the chat, when it came to Ahmaud Arbery, were saying, well, the McMillans and Bryant had a right to do what they did. And it seemed to us in many situations, the reasons they were saying that was because of race. Now, no one came out and just said it, but it seemed like they were fighting so hard for certain things to be true when they clearly weren't true. And I'm just over here like, well, I don't care that the McMillans are white and Arbery is black. I'm just looking at the facts. I don't care that, Chauvin is white and George Floyd is black. Just looking at the facts. I don't care that Kyle Rittenhouse is white and his victims are white. Just looking at the facts, ma'am. Wherever the facts lead, they lead. Yeah.
getting the emotions from that, and that's difficult, right? It's difficult to look at the person in a more unbiased way, but I think it's to everyone's benefit to do that, to try our best to do that, to try your best to look at it in an unbiased way as much as possible.
I agree. I think that the racial aspect of this is actually peripheral. If anything, if the demonstrations had been union based, right? Like union demonstrations that became riots and had gone out there, nobody would be saying anything about, oh, he's anti-riot, but because or he's anti-union.
Right.
They might be saying he's anti-riot because kind of was, but but they wouldn't be saying he's anti-union because he went out and shot people. Like if the exact same events had happened, but the protests had been based on a different topic, it wouldn't be as, I don't think it would be as divisive. This isn't like the Ahmaud Arbery case, which is clearly racially motivated, but they're also trying to use self-defense, and I don't see that one working. I really cross my fingers and hope that one doesn't.
I don't think it's going good for them so far, but you never know with trials.
Right.
I mean, I thought the George Floyd case was pretty clear, and it turned out there was a conviction. And of course, we're going to see what happens with the other officers at some point here. I think that there are cases where you can say, look, there's injustice, like George Floyd is a good example, and you have a lot of ground to stand on. Like that was very clear.
Absolutely.
There are other cases where it doesn't really seem to be about race, to your point, and yet I think, and Rittenhouse is one of those cases, I believe, but yet it's kind of become about that and become about systemic injustice and not so much about the particular facts. It's almost like people don't even want to know the facts.
Well, that much is true. I mean, I'll give them a point when they get a point, right? I mean, blue shirt guy speaking some truth here at this moment, right? This is true. I mean, he's right. It's not about race. It never was about race. Some people are making it about race. and systemic issues. And some people don't want to look to the facts. Right. This is a problem. This is a problem. We can only deal out justice on individual cases. And we look at the facts of individual cases. So he's right. Some people want to be blind to the reality of it. Some people are making it about race when there is no racial factor. Like there was, for example, in Arbery. Or like there was, in maybe some other cases. And some people don't want to look to the individual cases because they don't care. They just want to talk about systemic this and systemic that without paying attention to the facts. If they keep everything in soft focus, it doesn't disrupt the narrative. So blue shirt guy speaking some truth, point.
Right? Like, don't clutter my mind with those facts. I already made up my mind. But, Darlie Rotier, that case always reminds me of this. You see a lot of people who they're not interested in the actual facts of that case.
Right.
She's definitely innocent or she's definitely guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could, I think, make a good argument either way. But it's one of those, Betty Broderick, another one. It was an emotional reaction. She pretty much admitted she did it, right? She said she had the gun. She shot.
Right. Yeah. Pretty proud of it,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I mean.
And to this day, refuses to back down from that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say more than admit. Like, yeah, like you said, she's proud. It was her privilege to commit double homicide. Yeah, so I think the bias issue, the checking the bias, the controlling for the bias, being aware of the bias, would be to look at the actual facts and try to decide it just based on the evidence that the jury had.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. That would be the way to do it. Let's just look at the actual facts. And wherever they lead, they lead. Whatever the story that emerges is the story that emerges. So yeah, I mean, blue shirt guy here speaking some truths. Hopefully this will continue.
Or even all the evidence. And I don't see a guilty anywhere in there. And I've looked. The case, the closing argument and all the other arguments by the prosecutor was, cross-examination.
Well, good for him, man. He admits that he looked at all the facts and he can't find a guilty. So, hey, I looked at all the facts. I can't find it. Good for him.
Direct witnesses. I was looking for okay, this is the state wanting to put someone in prison for life. Show me what you got. I'm open to hearing it. And I think his name was it Binger?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He just kept, not literally, but just falling on the ground. Like he wasn't going anywhere.
Like he was like that boxer, just like
somehow punches himself.
His opponent just whips right past his face and he falls out like hot shots.
Yeah. There's like a pause and then
there's a pause and he just falls down. I really do think that he kind of, and I think it was an unconscious thing. I don't think it was something he consciously said, I'm going to throw this case. But I think that he looked and said, there's a 17-year-old white kid, and if I convict him, he's going to jail for the rest of his life. And I don't think that I can do that.
See, I read Binger.
Really? So you think that Binger and Krause, the prosecutors, you think that they purposefully threw the case? That's an interesting take. It's an interesting take, particularly because we have witnesses who testify to what they did and videos and everything else. But your theory is that Binger looked at Kyle, a 17-year-old kid, and he said to himself, I just can't set this 17-year-old to jail for the rest of his life. So I'm going to purposefully throw the case. I mean, as opposed to the facts just being horrible, right? So to go to your boxing analogy, a boxer analogy, the boxer keeps whiffing. The punches keep missing. He keeps falling down and tripping over himself. He keeps getting hit. So I guess one of two possibilities. The boxer's throwing the fight, or the boxer sucks. Right? So which is it? Well, what does the evidence show, my friend? And in this case, yeah, it's just that the boxer sucks. It's not that he's throwing the foes, it's that he's Glass Joe. So, yeah.
As desperately wanting to get a conviction.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I read him. It's hard to,
I read that. That's a thing. I read that too in like the swagger he was holding. Like I almost a desperate to do this. But then, like, at every step, he fell down, and no prosecutor gets to the point where they're trying capital cases without with that kind of stupidity.
Yeah. Well, and then he tried to introduce.
They do when they have nothing to work with, right? I mean, Binger was doing pretty well for himself, all things being considered. As I mentioned several times, for my money overall, I think Binger was a better lawyer than, Richards. I think he has ethics problems for bringing the case, but strictly by argumentation strategy, I think Binger was better overall. Not to say he was flawless or even perfect or even exceptional, but he was competent, he was good, and it even had moments of positive insight and positive, really strong things. There were elements of Binger that were really, really good. I mean, from just a tactician standpoint, that we could learn from. But the problem was that he had nothing to work with. You can't make something from nothing. So that's a problem. It doesn't matter how good you are if you don't have the underlying facts. If you're going to build your house, on the sand, yeah.
Do something the judge had clearly thrown out, and he got yelled at, and Schroeder was right. I mean, that was already ruled. It was no question. It wasn't a gray. He didn't say, I'm not really sure. If you want to, go ahead. He said no, and Binger tried to sneak it right in there. I think it was Binger. Maybe it was the other guy or Binger.
It was Binger.
She snuck it in there.
I think it was Binger. Yeah.
And
they tried to bring it. I don't remember what the piece of evidence was, but yeah, Schroeder clearly said in pretrial motions, no, you can't use this, and he still tried to enter it in.
Yeah, I think it was something with the whole white supremacy argument or something like that.
It might have been. Yeah.
I think you were talking about Binger and how. Sorry, I was just trying to remember what you had said there. So you were talking about Binger and how he, desperation, how he was desperate. You felt like he was desperate. And it definitely seemed like that because he seemed like he had some arguments that he felt he was going to succeed on. And didn't really seem to have a backup for it. Like just like utterly unprepared for what could possibly happen. And I imagine that the job of being an attorney is very difficult, right? And not many people want to do it. But you got to have the right stuff to do it, and being able to come at things from all angles and just fight your case to the death. That's what it takes to be an attorney. And I didn't see any of that. I didn't see any of that resolve to be like, I'm going to try whatever it takes to get there. It was more like, didn't do that one? All right, I'm going to give up.
I felt like
okay, so a couple things. First of all, attorneys in general should fight death and nail. But as I pointed out other times, prosecutors have special ethics rules, right? They have Rule 8.3 in the ethics rule. It's Rule 8.3, which is special rules for prosecutors. So a normal attorney has the duty of competence. They have the normal duty of zealous representation. They have normal duty of fidelity and loyalty and fiduciary and fighting for their client and trying to bring the case any way they can. But prosecutors have other concerns. They have their own special set of rules. Prosecutors are only supposed to seek justice, not convictions. Prosecutors are only supposed to seek cases where they believe that they have it. They're not supposed to try to convict the innocent. They're not supposed to try to, put away the innocent people in jail. So Binger's endless creativity, while admirable from a tactician level, is very, very unadmirable from an ethics level, right? If Binger was the defense attorney doing what Binger did, then he could do that because the defense doesn't have Rule 8.3 now, do they? Right? So if Binger was doing the exact same thing, like if you imagine some contra scenario where like the facts were as bad for Kyle as they were good, right? So you imagine some contra scenario where the facts were as bad as they were in fact good. And in this alternate universe, Binger was a defense attorney, and Binger had been making those kinds of arguments in the face of the nothing as a defense attorney, right? We would criticize it. We would criticize it as it not being foundational or not being illogical or not being well-reasoned or not being, you're arguing from nothing. It's like you're trying to do a magic trick. So we would argue it that way. We'd say, there's just nothing here. You're trying to do some smoke and mirrors. We're not buying it. but we wouldn't have these ethics problems for the defense attorney. We'd be like, you tried your best with a nothing. You tried to do a magic act. We admire it. It doesn't work. He should be convicted. Maybe, for example, like what the McMillan's lawyers were doing, and maybe what the Roddy Bryant's lawyers were doing in the Arbery case. That might be a very good example, for example, because the facts were just about as bad for the McMillans and Bryant as they were good for Rittenhouse. So McMillan and Bryant's lawyer were trying to do this. Whether or not they were doing it successfully or particularly competently is a whole other set of problems. But, whatever problems they had, we didn't have the ethics issues. Now we have ethics issues because we're talking about prosecutors. And so the prosecutor can't just go to the end of the earth and fight for their client, because their client is the state. And the state is restricted by things like due process and fundamental rights and things like that. So there's all that. Also, I think Binger tried to do everything he could, and I think he tried to look at it from every possible way. I didn't think he was particularly great in trying to develop his primary theory, but I thought his primary theory, at least the one he gave in opening, was actually pretty good. It seemed like the best argument in the face of the nothing. Not a great argument, but it was all he had. Binger's essential argument, by the way, in the opening seemed to be the situation was dangerous, the situation was chaotic, the situation was violent, the situation was anarchistic, right? And there were bottles being thrown, there were rocks being thrown, there were fires being made, and etc. and so forth. And so everyone else in Kenosha is roughly in the broad, generally speaking, in the exact same threat scenario, right? So they're all facing this exact same chaotic environment. But only Kyle Rittenhouse killed somebody. So because no one else felt the need to pull the trigger, because no one else felt the need to engage in self-defense, because no one else felt the need to protect themselves in the face of the rioting and the arsoning and the burning of property and the destruction of property and the throwing of bottles, the throwing of rocks, the punching, the tipping of porta potties, and so forth and so on, right? Because no one else did that, therefore, it was inherently unreasonable for Rittenhouse to do it, because Rittenhouse was in the same global situation. So because everyone else wasn't behaving this way, and there were a lot of other people there, Rittenhouse is the abrogation, and therefore we can conclude Rittenhouse is acting unreasonably. That seemed to be the prosecutor's argument. Now the contra from the defense is pretty easy too. It's like, yeah, in general, everyone's situations are the same, but what matters is the specifics. Right? So everyone else's situation is broadly the same. We concede that point. But what matters is what was happening to Rittenhouse. And then we get into the specific threat from Graskowitz. We get into those specific chasing. We get into the fact of him being pinned down. We get into the fact of him being on the ground and so forth and so on. So it's like whatever can be said for truths in general doesn't matter, because what matters is what's specific to Kyle Rittenhouse. So I call it a forest versus trees argument. Right? The prosecution wants you to look at the forest. They want you to look at the forest, and this tree, which is Rittenhouse, is just one part of the forest. Let's look at the entire forest, and whatever's true of the entire forest must be true of this tree. And what the defense wants to do is, no, let's look at the tree. It has unique qualities. So that seemed to be where the prosecution was going. Whether or not they well developed that or not, I'll leave to your own imagination. But it ultimately doesn't work because the specifics are too good. But that seemed to be what he was trying to do. And for my money, I couldn't think of anything better. I couldn't think of a different strategy that would work better. And even that strategy I felt was unethical because of the facts in the specific were too good for that argument to really work. So I didn't think it was an ethical argument, but that seemed to be the argument. It seemed to be the best argument. It didn't seem to me that Binger was unprepared. It seemed to me he had developed the best possible argument from the nothing. And he just wants to say what's true in the general must be true in the specific. And, try to get the jury to focus on the general and say, well, it must be true of Rittenhouse too. So I think he came up with the best strategy he had. I don't think it was because he was ill-prepared.
He didn't have any finesse. One of the points where I kind of realized that his case was on fire was when, in a bad way, like a dumpster fire, was when he was questioned. It was on Cross. Now, Cross of the defendant is a huge opportunity for. That's like, I think probably most prosecutors live for that moment.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, they're going to testify. I'm going to get them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to wipe out all the gains on direct and gain something for the state.
Yeah.
And he went on this like moralistic rant almost, or dialogue about Kyle not having a driver's license. Oh, see, he drove anyway. Like, that's not a capital offense. I get it. You shouldn't drive without a license, but it just wasn't that exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you seem petty, that was petty, right? For the state to be interested in that charge was petty. And I think, you know, jurors look at something like that and think, this guy's got nothing. And he got nothing. We're going to convict him of murder. We're on the fence. But you know what pushed us over the edge? That driver's license thing. That is no way.
Trial's over. Everyone go home.
He's not wrong.
But my favorite part was the arson thing, where you could just see him. He kind of like got lost in his head, like he was fantasizing about prosecuting this dead guy for arson. He just couldn't let it go. But that's why I thought he did have the eye of the tiger in one sense. Like, he was determined, and he's such a hardcore prosecutor. He even wanted to prosecute a dead guy. That's pretty serious.
Well, I mean, if the dead guy was committing crimes, then yeah, I kind of wish I could prosecute him, but he's dead. So, you know, but it's probably good for a prosecutor to be like, you know, really wish I could bring that guy to justice because he did bad things. So, kind of probably a good trait of a prosecutor, I would think.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, taking a look at the merits of the case, right? If we kind of look at what is the evidence we were supposed to make the decision on, I think a lot of it comes down to those. I don't know what took those videos, drones or helicopters or something.
Couple of them.
Yeah, they said, I don't know if they said drones or if they said it
One
must
was
have been
a drone.
drones. Yeah.
Well, that was the one at the
That was
end.
one with the question about the
question
file
about
transfer.
the quality of it, and the file transfer was a drone camera, but some of them were taken by people on their cell phones.
Did you, in closing arguments, did you see closing arguments on
Most of it, yeah.
I didn't get a chance to watch the closing arguments.
He was playing the video, you know, and this isn't unusual. He's playing the video again to have that be the last thing in the jury's mind. And, you know, for a lot of those videos, all I saw was one blob and another blob.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, that blob is evil and he has intent. I'm like, it's just a blob. Like, where are you getting, like, I don't get it. And if I'm feeling that way, I would think the jury's kind of looking at that as too. Like, where do we see a gun being pointed?
Mm-hmm.
And he was insistent that Rittenhouse raised the AR-15 and pointed at people in the crowd and at Rosenbaum and at Huber. Can you show me? Like, I didn't see that.
I mean, blue shirt guy's being pretty reasonable, all things considered. Blue shirt guy's being pretty reasonable. He's like, well, I looked at the evidence and I looked at these videos and all I see are some blobs. And it's like, you want to say this blob is raising the gun at this blob? I can't see it. Well, that's good because I couldn't see it either. So he's like, yeah, show me the evidence. So this is what you have to work with? Oh, these blobs? Oh, yeah, I'm definitely being able to determine what's going on from these blobs. And it's kind of how I felt, too. So, yeah, blue shirt guy's being pretty reasonable so far. I mean, in all things considered.
I use the word doctored. I don't know if that's accurate, but they modified the video.
Did they definitely?
I think they enhanced it. And that's what the judge,
right, with the iPad thing and all that.
Yeah, and the judge went like a 15-minute speech with his phone, and he's like, when I blow something up, I'm like, we already knew. You didn't have to do the whole 15 minutes. When you blow something up, the pixels don't get any clearer. And he's showing you his phone.
Right.
like
somebody's going to be able to see it or something. Yeah.
Well, that was his point.
Right.
Because he took, I think the judge said he took pictures of his text messages, and then, because he didn't know how to save them. Okay. And he blew them up, and they don't get any clearer. So how can this video be any clearer?
Right.
And he's like, well, who knows? Maybe there's some scientific way, but he had a good point.
Yeah, there isn't any such computer program that allows you to it's like, hey, can you digitally enhance that? And all of a sudden everything is
like on TV.
It's not like
all of a sudden you can see it.
It's not like in CSI or on the TV. You got a side guys in there like, you enhance that video? Yeah, sure. and then the video just clears up.
magically.
Have you ever seen like Law and
No.
Order? They would get on the license plate like this, like it'd be like on a New York building, like
Right,
eight
right.
stories up, the camera, and they'd be like, "Hey, can you, like Jerry Orbach, like, can you zoom in on that plate?" And you go in, it was like you can see all the
like perfectly, no questions.
It's like that's a perfect shot. That's wonderful.
Jerry Orbach was great in Law and Order.
That kind of thing always reminds me of the first Taken movie, where he's got this flip phone, and of course it's got a terrible camera on it, no doubt about it. I think it was a flip phone, or he's got some kind of terrible camera, and he like looked at the reflection of something to find like the license plate of the people that had taken his daughter. I think it was a reflection, or it was super far away or something. It was like in the background or something. And I always think about, I'm like, wait a minute, you guys are hinging this whole movie on him finding that. And this is what, I don't know, early 2000s or late 90s, whatever it is. And you're like, you're telling me you have a camera good enough to do something like that in like the far distance, or a reflection or whatever it was? I think it was a reflection in a mirror. And it was like, this, like, I know it's a movie. All right, I'll give him that. But some of the things they come up with, it's like, you couldn't do any better than that? Like, just give us something that's even a little bit believable.
2008. But
Was it 2008? Thanks for clearing that up. Not late 90s.
2008.
I was 10 years early.
Just before the smartphone thing really
right.
hit. Like if it was a smartphone,
You'd have maybe a fighting chance of that.
people
But it wasn't.
you might, but
Don't they have
I mean,
8K smartphones
oh,
now?
yeah, if it was like my phone, it was like the 100 megapixel camera on this thing. Like it's insane. You could do it with that, but with the phone that he had,
Right.
yeah, no, that wasn't going to happen.
Oh boy.
He may have a particular set of skills, but enhancing images from a terrible camera phone is
not one of them.
not one of them.
I remember in the early
Or
2000s,
apparently, it is.
Apparently it is, right?
when digital cameras were relatively new. I went to buy one at like, I don't know what, like Circuit City, Best Buy, one of the, whatever, all kind of the same. And there was some salesman there, and I'm like, I want the most, the highest megapixels that I can get. I know it's
Yeah.
going to improve. And the phone, it was like, or the camera I bought was a Samsung. And it was 4 megapixels, and that was like not the best, but pretty close at the time. And the guy's like, we're never going to have more than this. I'm like, well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, it seems like they're always going up. No, who needs more than that? What are you doing with this camera? You have to have more than that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's going to go up, but I'll just buy it anyway because I know I need it. And but yeah, that was like 4 megapixel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
can
right. What
zoom
could
in.
you? I mean, just like computers, who would ever need more than 512 megabytes of RAM?
Who's
why would
going to
they?
need more than that?
Right.
That's half a gig. Who's going to need more than that?
Right.
Everybody. Everybody's going to need more than that.
Well, I think that in a few years we'll be throwing out the word terabyte like we throw around gigabyte now.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially as video resolution keeps going up. It takes up a lot more space.
Mm-hmm.
Like 4K takes up way more than HD. I don't even know. I don't have an 8K camera, but they make them. They're out there. I don't know what you can do with it because you can't upload anywhere to 8K, I don't think. But I guess someday.
They'll get there.
So let's go through the circumstances of what happened here in this case. This case really, okay, the gun charge was out, right? 6 charges, that one was out. The reckless endanger or whatever, but not going to worry about that. This was really about 2 alleged murders and 1 alleged attempted murder.
Mm-hmm.
It was 3 times he fired his weapon. It pretty much just comes
4.
down to that because the endangerment charges were tied to him firing the weapon.
Right.
So if he was justified in shooting it, I don't really see how you're going to get the conviction on, and they didn't, of endangerment. But I think Binger was trying to make that argument. It didn't matter if he was guilty of the murder, still had him on the endangering. I didn't see that. How's that work?
It was one of like Binger, like he didn't have a good coherent argument. That's the thing. Like his strategy was like, I don't know what he was trying.
Let's try speeding up the audio and the video a little bit. Yeah, let's try speeding it up to 1.5 times because we're not getting some really good stuff. So let's speed up the playback. We'll speed it up to 1.5 times, and if that turns out to be too much, we can come back. But let's speed it up a little bit.
In pretrial motions, when he was trying to get in one particular image, he used the term vigilante, and it's like he's going to try and set up this this whole thing about his state of mind. was vigilante. Like he went there to be a vigilante. And then when the judge was like, no, you can't bring that in, it's prejudicial and it has nothing to do with what happened that night. It's like Binger just went, well, there's my whole case gone. I don't know what to do now. like there were other things, other resources he could have gone to get that same result, like that same tactic of prove he was a vigilante, prove that he was trying to be a cop, but he wasn't a cop, and you can get self-defense thrown out.
Yeah, well, the provocation was his whole thing was the provocation.
Yeah.
I think
I think he went with the provocation, but he should have gone with the vigilantism. Because if he could show that he's there as a vigilante, all night he's there as a vigilante, then all night he's there, his presence in Kenosha makes him a vigilante, he's committing a crime. Because in Wisconsin, vigilantism is illegal.
Is it? Is there a crime in Wisconsin called with vigilante? Hold on. Is there a crime in Wisconsin called vigilante? Not that I see. I certainly am not aware of any. Being a vigilante is not a crime. Some of the acts vigilantes may conduct are crimes, but there's no crime called vigilante or vigilantism. So you can't just call Rittenhouse a vigilante and be like, well, that negates self-defense because there is no crime called vigilante. That's not a thing. You'd have to actually lay out a specific crime he was committing. And there's no crime called that. So, no.
There's an article I read as I was researching for this from 2019, where the Wisconsin Attorney General reminded the general public that vigilantism is illegal.
Yeah, what's the definition of it, though? I mean, he was armed, which he was allowed to be. He was in Kenosha, which he was allowed to be. What action makes him a vigilante, or would make him one?
I closed that window. Vigilantism, law enforcement undertaken without legal authority by a self-appointed group of people.
Yeah,
that's a dictionary definition. That's a dictionary definition of vigilante, which I will not contest. But if you're going to say vigilantism as such is illegal, you're going to need not a dictionary. You're going to need a citation to the criminal code. So I don't really care that much about what Merriam-Webster or Oxford Free Press or anyone else says is a definition of vigilante. If you want it to be a crime, then you need a specific definition. And the Attorney General saying it's illegal to be a vigilante doesn't necessarily make it so. Because vigilantism might imply a whole bunch of things that are crimes, but strictly speaking, vigilantism unto itself is not a crime. There's no crime called vigilante or vigilantism. So no.
So you have to enforce the law, which I don't think he did. Right? He didn't enforce the law.
He was by saying it's our job to protect this business.
Those are words, though.
Yeah.
What did he do?
Well, he was there with a gun, and the word saying because it does become intent. Becomes a very important part of this.
But you have to do it too, though, right?
Right. Yeah. He's like, it's our job to protect this business, and he's there on the premises of the business to protect it with a weapon, and he ends up shooting two people.
Right. You'd have to tie them to the law enforcement behavior. Yeah.
Well, the question is he on the property to protect the property with the firearm, which isn't obvious, right? Or is he there just to protect himself from the firearm, right? So there is a huge distinction here. Right? You can't use a firearm merely to protect property, but you can use it to protect yourself. So if you make yourself a barrier between you and the property, right? If you make yourself a barrier between the bad people and the property, then in order to get to the property, they have to come through you. So now they're a threat to you. Then you're using the firearm to defend yourself, not the property. So he was there to defend the property, but not necessarily with the firearm. If you could show that he was there for that purpose, first of all, I'm not sure why it would matter necessarily, because even if that was his purpose, you'd have to show that he actually fired to execute that purpose, right? you'd have to show that he fired for the purpose of protecting the property. Because assuming he had the intention and mental state to use the firearm for the purpose of protecting property, if we can assume that he had that mental state, you still need to show the action that's connected to that mental state, right? Criminal law works by mens rea, and actus reus. Mens rea and actus reus. You need both. You need both mental state and act. Mental state and act. So if you've act without mental state, which could happen, for example, because mistake of fact, because of insanity, because of, hypnosis or something, I don't know. But you could have action, a pure accident maybe. So you could have action without mental state, then you don't have a crime. On the other hand, you could have mental state without action, in which case you don't have a crime. So even if they could prove, for a matter of fact, somehow that Kyle Rittenhouse had the action, he had the intention and desire, the goal and purpose of using his firearm for the purpose of protecting property, you would still have to show he actually used the firearm for the purpose of protecting the property. The mere intent doesn't matter as long as you don't have the action behind it. So, all those things. Oh, so people, apparently there is a statute on this. So let's take a look at this and see, because people are leaving a statute and we don't want to leave it behind. So let's see what it has to say. 939.48, self-defense and defense of others. Yeah, we know about self-defense and defense of others. I'm assuming this doesn't define vigilante. Why are we citing this? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't define vigilante. It just defines what self-defense is under Wisconsin law. That's not the issue we're trying to argue at this exact moment. I was just pointing out that even if you can assume for an absolute fact, Kyle Rittenhouse had the design and purpose and intent of protecting property with a firearm, unless he actually uses the firearm to defend the property, his intention is irrelevant because you don't have a connection between intent and crime. So them showing that he had that intent is immaterial because the defense argues, well, the intent was connected to self-defense, which seems, much more well predicated based on the facts. So I'm not sure exactly why the chat is giving me back self-defense law. I was just giving you an alternate hypothetical. I was like, assume this much is true. Right? That's what I was doing. Assume this much is true. If this much is true, then you still need this other thing. Because that's their whole argument. Their whole argument is like, well, they could show that he's there as a vigilante. Their argument is, well, we can show he's there as a vigilante. We can show he was there to use a firearm to protect property. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's assume that. Let's assume he was a vigilante. Let's assume he was there to protect firearm with property. Okay, I accept your premise. Now, even with that premise in place, we still need this additional step. And we don't have it. We don't have it because we don't have any facts that would connect us to that preposition from that premise. We don't have any facts that would connect us from that premise to an act that's in furtherance of the premise, so the premise is therefore irrelevant. So even assuming their facts to be true, I don't care. That was my entire point. I hope that's clear.
You can tie in that he went there with the intention of trying to protect that business as his job.
Well, we talked about that, right? Are people allowed, and I think this is the heart of the case in one sense, are people allowed to defend property, either property they own, he didn't own it, but property they own or property they don't own? Is that allowed?
Yes.
And that's, I think, what would have been...
you are allowed to defend property you don't own with non-lethal force. Yeah. Yes, you are allowed to defend property with non-lethal force. That's correct. So you could use non-lethal means to protect your property. That would be fine. And yeah, even defend property you don't own, because in that case, you're doing defense of others. I mean, this, of course, assumes the person that's attacking the property doesn't own the property. So if you make a mistake, you might be screwed there. But if it's just some random person and you're trying to protect the property, yeah, that's probably almost certainly okay.
The question for the jury in this case, and I think that would have been the most pertinent question for the jury, was he acting as a vigilante at that time? Was he acting as a police officer? Was he trying to act as a police officer? Because if he was trying to act as a police officer, then he was committing a crime. And in Wisconsin, at least, if you're committing a crime and you should kill someone, you can't claim self-defense. The privilege of self-defense is removed. And if
Again, no. No. If again, assuming the premise that he was there to act as a police officer, that doesn't mean that doing so was a crime. Because citizens have the right to act as what you might consider to be police officers in certain roles. For example, the police have the right to defend property, so do private citizens. The police have the right to prevent damage to property, so do private citizens. So it's not necessarily acting as a police officer. And even if he was, there might be citizens arrest statutes that might apply. But again, even if you assume this underlying premise, he was there to be a police officer, merely going with the intent to be a police officer is not illegal. If you're intending to act as a police officer, you still have to show some action that itself was illegal. That would be in furtherance of that purpose. And what would that be?
he could, and that would have been a much, much bigger argument. And a little bit more sound, and would have had a little bit better chance of getting conviction.
Yeah, maybe more interesting.
On a lesser charge, I think.
Maybe more interesting argument, because the provocation, I mean, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
So he was kind of like just dancing around, like flailing about. Like, where's the provocation? I didn't see one point where there was provocation.
Because when for the vigilantism, all they have to prove is that he was there to do that job, and then he said, "Hey, stop that." Then that's an act where he's acting to try and stop someone who's attempting to break the law. That he's acting as a law enforcement official.
No. Merely because you say to someone, hey, stop doing that illegal thing, does not mean you're acting as a law enforcement individual. Nor is it illegal for you to tell someone to stop doing this illegal thing. I'm pretty sure it's legal for you to tell people to stop doing illegal things. And whether or not that's wise or not, but yeah, it's probably legal to go around and say, hey, person, you seem to be breaking the law. Please stop breaking the law. That's not acting as a police officer. It's not illegal. It's very legal to discourage people from breaking the law. That's the kind of thing the law would like you to do. Please stop. Please go around and discourage people from breaking the law. That's the kind of thing the law would support. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I could see.
But they could have brought a lot of his background stuff in to demonstrate that.
Well, I think they also the defense could bring in the background of the rioters in that case, right? Because they were breaking the law, right? So kind of like, well, it's a bunch of lawless people.
I actually think that would have backfired on the defense if they would have brought in that, hey, these guys were criminals. Well, if the prosecutors all say, well, these guys were criminals. He was trying to stop criminals. That makes him a vigilante.
Tied to the policing.
No. No. Again, that wouldn't backfire on the defense. Because these people are criminals, doesn't mean that he is acting to stop them as criminals. Because what matters, as I've explained many, many times, is Kyle's mental state at the time. Kyle can only rely on what they know, what he knows, which is exactly the reason that these people who he shot, their character isn't coming in. Their prior crimes isn't coming in. That's precisely the reason why. Kyle doesn't know that. So Kyle can't rely on that. Kyle can't get lucky, nor can he get unlucky. What matters is what he did know at the time, not what was theoretically possible for him to know in some sort of alternate universe. So the very reason that these facts weren't brought in is because no one opened the door for them. Now, what the prosecution can do, or what either side can do for that matter, is they can say they can bring in character for themselves, right? But if they do that, they open the door, right? So the prosecution can open the door, or the defense can open the door, and then it's open for both sides. Depends who's calling the witness. For the prosecution opens the door. For the defense opens the door. Depends who called the witness. So one of the people the prosecutor called was this great aunt, who seemed to be there for purely character reasons, to which the defendant objected, which continues to blow my mind. Because what the prosecution seemed to want to get from this great aunt is, well, my baby wouldn't do nothing wrong, right? That's not the person he is. He doesn't have that character. So, what you think you observed couldn't possibly be true, because that's not who my baby is, right? He's a boy who don't do nothing wrong. So he wasn't acting that way at the time, right? We're using his character and saying, well, he generally does this and behaves that way, so he wasn't behaving differently in that particular moment, right? The problem, of course, is if the great aunt brings that in, then the defense can suddenly chime in with, oh, that's interesting. Let's talk about some other elements about his character that might be really interesting to inform what might have been going on at the moment or not, right? If you're going to bring it in for the purpose of showing he didn't act that way, now suddenly I can bring it in for the purpose of saying he did act that way. But in either case, is it bringing in for the purpose of saying Kyle is arresting them because Kyle doesn't know either way, because all you're bringing it in for is to help understand how that guy was behaving. It doesn't ultimately go to Kyle's knowledge. It just goes to show what that guy and how he's behaving and what might or might not be reasonably perceivable based on that. But otherwise, it's not Kyle's knowledge. So if they had shown that these people, if the defense had been able to bring in these guys' criminal records, it doesn't therefore imply that Kyle Rittenhouse was engaging them on that basis, right? Because he doesn't have that knowledge. So even if the defense had brought in, hey, look at these guys' extensive criminal records, guys, and then this guy's like, well, that'd be really bad for the defense, because then that would allow them to say, hey, he's engaging in law enforcement. Well, only if Kyle knew that. If he doesn't know that, then he can't be engaging in his actions for that purpose. Now, can he?
Yeah.
Like that would, I think that would have been, because that's the thing, like that's the tactic that would have countered some of that stuff. Like a defense would have been like, oh, if they were good, they would have been like, no, we can't like impugn the people that were shot, because if we bring up the criminal history, then they're just going to be like, well, see, they were criminal, so they were acting criminal. The defense is admitting they're acting criminal, and he tried to stop them. Therefore, vigilante. And I think
that's not at all even beginning to be relevant. That doesn't even make sense. I don't even think that flows from its own premises. I think that's a logic fail, just to be quite honest. It's like, okay, premise is we're bringing it in. Premise is we're establishing they're criminals. Premise is they were acting as criminals in that moment in furtherance of that character. Premise is they were acting in a criminal way. Premise is Kyle was able to observe them acting in a criminal way, consistent with that behavior. And Kyle, therefore, was correct in his observation that they were behaving criminally towards them. Therefore, vigilantism? No, it's not vigilantism. It's that they were behaving in a criminal way towards him, and he wasn't trying to stop them for behaving criminally in some abstract sense, like the police might do when like people are just committing crimes, but not towards them specifically. So if they're just committing crimes, but not towards the police officers specifically, then they're arresting them for the crime. But if the criminal action is happening towards them, that's not the police acting externally. It's now them acting internally and engaging in lawful self-defense. So that's not what vigilantism makes. That doesn't make sense.
That would have, again, it's more interesting, but it would have had a better chance of some sort of conviction. Probably not of the murder charges, but they would have found something lesser.
Well, so this is an interesting point then. There's this debate about whether Kyle was invited to the car thing, and it's a big back and forth. I'm going to assume he is, because there was some communication that said, we want this protected. So
from what I read, he did talk to the guy, and he texted. We know that he texted the guy, but that his friend that he ended up going with was invited, and he was like, hey, can I come along with you after that? And his friend was like, yeah, come on. And they went up.
That seems legitimate, right? Yeah. So it wasn't adverse to the will of the dealership owner.
He never asked him to leave. He was in a picture with them.
Seems clear.
Even though I think he said in the trial that he didn't. I believe he said he didn't ask him to come.
I think
didn't he say that in the trial? The son of the owner.
Right. Somebody. I don't know if they changed their story or whatever, but they denied it. I don't know if that was the original story, but I thought someone else said that they were definitely invited. So it seems like it's split. I'm gonna.
And there were some other guys who were there as well.
Yeah. I tell you.
And also, to the extent that it's split between the dealers and other witnesses, to the extent it is split, I'd respectfully suggest that we as observers and the jury as jurors, one of the things jurors do is they can assess credibility of witnesses. They can believe or disbelieve a witness in whole or part. They can believe a witness is lying about some things, but not lying about other things. Or they can believe a witness is lying about all the things. Or they can believe that a witness is only kind of partially a little bit lying. They can believe like any combination of these things, because it's for the jury to determine credibility. And also the jury can determine relative weight of the witnesses. So even if two witnesses are telling the truth, doesn't necessarily imply the two witnesses should be judged evenly. Because one person might be in a better position. One person might have more knowledge. One person might be a better observer. One person, whatever, right? So it's for the jury to determine how much the weight of the witnesses should be. It's for the jury to determine whether the witnesses should be believed in whole, in part, in fractions, none at all, whether they were just kind of lying, a little bit lying, partially lying, whatever, all those things. Well, we too, our friends, we too can play this game and we can determine for ourselves. Hey, wait a second, how should we evaluate this contrary testimony? And I would respectfully submit to you, my friends, that if we watch the trial and we watch the car source guys versus pretty much literally everyone else, I'd respectfully submit to you that the car sources guy's testimony strikes me as a little bit unreliable. Strikes me as a bit evasive. Strikes me as a bit non-cooperative and trying to hide the ball and trying to be a little bit cagey and not really say anything and basically blatantly lying at every single word they said. So even assuming that, the car source guys and other guys are presenting different pictures, I don't think it's fair to say these pictures are 50-50. We can do what the jury can do and say, wait a second, should we believe these guys or should we believe these guys? Well, these guys seem like they're clearly lying. So it's not really a 50-50 proposition now, is it?
Runner. That's how I look at it. Like if somebody says he was supposed to be there and someone else said he isn't, then he's safe. It's fine. But what are you allowed to do? Right? So if you are, say, he's functioning as a security guard, not a paid one.
But again, security guards have to be licensed.
Not in all states. I don't know about Wisconsin. I don't know if there's a.
I don't know. I know that in Delaware they do because I was
store detectives don't have to be licensed.
Store detectives don't.
And they can stop somebody for taking something.
Technically, because I was a store detective too. Technically, you're not allowed to do. Technically, not allowed to detain. You can ask them to come back in the store.
Oh, but maybe the law changed. When I did it many years ago, you could tackle somebody and drag them back in the store.
Well, see, that's the thing. When I was going through it, we weren't supposed to tackle. Like we were told, like you're not allowed to. Wink. like I saw.
Well, I can't speak to the law specifically in Delaware or anywhere else, but it would be very common, at least in common law. Let's speak to common law because Delaware can modify its statute any way it wants. But in common law, a shopkeeper could detain you. I don't know whether or not they, strictly speaking, can tackle you or not, but they can detain you. It's called shopkeeper's privilege. It's different, incidentally, than citizen's arrest. They have their own special thing just for them. It's called shopkeeper's privilege. It applies just to shopkeepers in addition to citizen's arrest. So I can't speak to what the law is in Delaware, but you should be allowed to detain them if you're a store detective, assuming, of course, you saw the person actually commit the crime in front of you, like literally that moment. So if you have actual knowledge, you should be able to detain them. But okay, I don't know whether about tackling or not.
Other store detectives do it, but but like when I was in my training period, like I had one store detective who actually chased this guy like half a block and tackled him. And while me and my trainer were walking up to him, she's like, "Never do this. This is illegal. We're technically not allowed to do this because we're not allowed to detain. But if you ever do it, just do it like this." I'm like, what?
Yeah,
you need to be certified to be a security guard in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. So he wasn't.
So he wasn't licensed, and that's the thing. Like, if the owner did have reason to fear for his
security guard is a licensed position, but it doesn't mean that Kyle Rittenhouse was acting as a security guard. He was acting a little bit differently. He was acting at the invitation of the business to protect the property, but it doesn't mean he was acting as a security guard. And even assuming that he was acting unlicensed, which, he wasn't charged with, incidentally, so how could it matter? Because it wasn't like he was charged with violation of some security law, so it doesn't really matter. I assume the prosecutor thought about it and couldn't find it, so I'm going to assume it doesn't apply. And if it does apply, they didn't charge it, so I don't care either way. But even if he was guilty of it, it doesn't matter as to the self-defense claims, right? In the same way that if he was possessing illegally, it wouldn't matter to the self-defense claims, right? He'd only be in violation of the underlying statutes. It doesn't go to the self-defense, so doesn't matter.
Property in his business. The night before, one of his vehicles had been torched. But if he was really concerned about it, there are security firms he could have hired.
I think he did hire one,
And I
but then
think
they backed out or something happened.
And that's that's fine, but it still doesn't make Kyle a valid choice. And if they were like, well, we want to have people come up, let's not have them come up, and then they show up anyway. Well, we're not going to send you away.
Yeah. I think the car dealer took a big chance by inviting armed people to stand on the property.
Absolutely.
I think you're better off letting the insurance company just pay you back for whatever burns.
Yeah.
In that case.
Assuming you can get the insurance company to pay you back for whatever burns. Because I don't know specifically about this car lot and their insurance, but it's not exactly uncommon for insurance contracts to exclude damage that occurs during civil unrest or riot. So I don't know that the insurance would pay them back, because this may not be covered depending on the nature of their insurance. So just to say, oh, the business had insurance, wouldn't necessarily bank on it.
But I can connect with the argument that people should have a right to defend their property, right? You break into a house, and a homeowner's in there, even if you're only intending to steal, homeowner can shoot you. No two ways about it under law. I don't think they should if they knew you were only going to steal. But realistically, they could.
And how would they know? Of course.
Yeah, exactly. If you knew for an absolute fact the person was only there to steal, then you wouldn't be able to engage in self-defense. If you somehow knew for an absolute fact the person who was breaking into your house was doing so only for the purpose of burglary and for the purpose of stealing, to be more specifically, and then was going to leave, then you wouldn't be able to engage in lethal self-defense. Although you would be able to engage in non-lethal self-defense because they're in defense of property. But of course, how are you supposed to know that? And the law gives a presumption that person breaks into your house for the purpose of committing a theft therein. They're there also with the intent to hurt you. So the law gives a presumption the other way. Presumptions, of course, can be rebutted. So if somehow you could prove that you knew for an absolute fact that something was true, then yeah, but the law is going to presume the exact opposite. This is also part of the reason why you don't talk to the police, because you might say something stupid like, yeah, I knew for an absolute fact he was only there to steal something from me. I knew that, and I shot him anyway. Please don't talk to the police. You might put yourself in jail.
Right.
Like Richard Ramirez. Like, how do you know he's just going to steal?
Right.
And there's an emergent element to that, though. There's I was at home, this person broke into my home. It's completely different to go, well, I'm going to go downtown to a business and protect that business.
There's a looking for trouble angle that, now, a lot of people say he wasn't looking for trouble. I don't know if he was or he wasn't, but he took a weapon into an area, and it seemed to be a weapon designed the way he was holding it, like strapped to his chest, to intimidate. But I'm a pro-gun person, right? You have the right to carry it. I'm all for that. But you never want, well, first of all, the best way is to conceal when you legally can, right? That's your advantage in self-defense, not showing people the weapon. But a weapon should never be used to intimidate. And there's a sense I think he was trying to do that. Like, look, I have this AR-15.
Well, I mean, it's to show that you are armed, which comes with advantages and disadvantages. I think as a general proposition, concealed carry is better. But in this particular situation, to show you're armed is probably better. But, I mean, it's just there to show that you're armed and in a capacity to defend yourself. So it's to say, if you try to attack me, then I have the capacity to defend myself, so probably don't attack me. I wouldn't exactly call that intimidation. I don't think necessarily I'm intimidating you by having a firearm to let you know I have a firearm. So if you attack me, I'll shoot you. If you consider that intimidation of the person who's plotting against me, I'm not sure why that's bad. I think I should probably be allowed to intimidate the person who's planning on doing harm to me. So they might think twice about doing that because they know I'm armed, but okay.
And, if I shot you, that would be bad. It sends a message.
Yeah.
It does. And I think that's an area where if we're going for the vigilante angle, the prosecutor would be like, and there's the provocation. Like, we also have provocation because he's in an intimidating situation. Like, he's going there looking for trouble, and he's dressed in a way that is provocative. It's going to provoke a reaction. It's a uniform.
Oh my God, no. With this tired talking point, oh my God, no. No. Oh my God, no. Okay. Okay. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Okay, first of all, he was dressed in a particular way to provoke. What a short skirt she was wearing. What a low-cut top she was wearing. How scantily clothes she was wearing. She was dressed provocatively. She was asking for it by the way she was dressed. She had those stilettos on and those short skirt and this almost see-through low cut, and had all that makeup on, man. She was dressed provocatively. So first of all, we're going down that line of argument. Oh, it's the way Kyle was dressed. The way Kyle was dressed is provocative. No. No. Just all the no. You have the way to dress. You can dress any legally way you want. And the manner of your dress is not provocation, no matter what you wear. You might, for example, go into the middle of a Biden rally wearing a MAGA hat, or maybe the exact opposite of that. It's not provocation. It's like, you can go into the most Christian fundamentalist area you ever, and wear devil makeup, and wear pro-choice shirts and whatever else. The manner of your dress is not legal provocation. Holy shit. I can't believe I have to explain this to people. I can't believe you have to explain this to people, right? People have the right to think you're a dick. People have the right to shun you. People have the right to, avoid you, not talk to you because you're dressed in a way that they don't like. So if they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to socialize with you, they don't want to engage with you, they want to ignore you because of the way you're dressed. Well, you're not entitled to any of those things now, are you? But you can't say, hey, you were dressed provocatively. You had it coming that these people were about to do this bad thing. Wow. Wow. Just wow. I can't believe we're going down this line. I can't believe we're going down the line of her skirt was so short, man. Wow. Second of all, it's an open carry state. So mere open carry is not provocation because it's an open carry state. It can't be provocation if what they're doing is purely legal, because then it just becomes like a manner of dress. Without more. Like, it would probably be possible. It's probably possible to provoke someone with words. I mean, fighting words, for example, are a great example. So you can provoke someone with words. They call them fighting words, for example. Or you might be able to harass someone so much that it gives them to the breaking point or something like that. But, the mere fact of you merely possessing a firearm in open carry and you carrying it strapped around yourself, with the gun pointed down and not brandished is not provocation. So it's a total legal non-starter for you to say either of those things is provocation. The way he had the firearm strapped around him, it's an open carry state. The fact he was merely open carrying without more cannot be legal provocation. Oh, it's the way he was dressed. Really? And how about the girl with the short skirt? Are we going down that road again? Wow, holy shit. These are some really bad arguments. Unbelievable. Let's press on.
Kind of thing. It's a style choice designed to evoke an image of military.
It's a style choice designed to invoke feelings of passion in men. It's a style choice designed to invoke the male gaze and invoke a fueled testosterone response. They can't be blamed for the way they responded to your provocative dress. Great.
Right. He should have gone with the tie-dye shirt and the shorts.
If he'd gone with tie-dye shirt and shorts and had like a 30-06 hunting rifle, just kind of like over his shoulder, that would be completely like, yeah, he's got a gun and it's there, but it's there. Can't hide a rifle like that. But he had a gun. He'd been able to protect, but he wouldn't have stood out.
Wait a second. What's the improved manner of dress here? I want to just make sure we get this all for the record for our own edification. So we all know that we all know the proper way to dress, right? So we won't be asking for it, right? So in the future we won't be asking for it. So he's going to tell us the proper way of dress, so we won't be asking for it. Okay, let's learn a little bit more about how we should be dressing to these things. Hold on.
He should have gone with the tie-dye shirt and the shorts.
If he'd gone with tie-dye shirt and shorts and had
Okay, guys, it's officially approved. It's officially approved by the mental health panel over here. Okay, guys. So as it turns out, if you go in a tie-dye shirt and shorts, that's totally different, and then you're not asking for it. So I think in the future maybe the people should look at tie-dye options. I mean, they could tie-dye the tactical. It usually comes in black, but I suppose you could tie-dye it. That'd be a way to go, and you could have like tie-dye tactical pants. I suppose you could tie-dye your gun, or at least accomplish the same effect. So it'd be tie-dyed, or maybe make it all pink, or something like that. That'd be badass. So yeah, maybe next time, not with the all black tactical, look, or olive green, because theirs was olive green. So not with the olive green, stuff, but rather you go with the tie-dye, and maybe make the gun tie-dyed, and that's totally approved. So you can do that in the future. More tie-dye for the open carry people, man. It's mental health approved. How fantastic. Now the more you know.
Like a 30-06 hunting rifle, just kind of like over his shoulder, that would be completely like, yeah, he's got a gun and it's there, but it's there. Can't hide a rifle like that. But he'd have had a gun. He'd been able to protect, but he wouldn't have stood out as being in uniform. But the whole look, as we talked about, like the green shirt and the camo cargo pants, like that's a classic military look.
I don't feel he
the whole look with the olive green shirt and the cargo pants, the whole look with the low cut halter top and the short skirt with the bare midriff. Yeah.
In the 1-point harness and the AR-15, I'm pro gun too, and I hate it when the media goes military style weapon,
assault weapons.
Yeah, assault style, because they don't say assault weapon anymore because they say assault style weapon, because like technically there is only one legal document in the United States that classifies anything as an assault weapon, and that's the U.S. Military Code, and it defines an assault weapon as one with a select fire feature, which the AR-15 does not have. Therefore, it is not an assault weapon by definition.
It's semi-automatic.
It's semi-automatic. Yeah. One.
Well, thank you for clearing that up, at least. It's not an assault weapon because it doesn't have a select fire capability. You are correct, sir. So you got one thing right.
Pull the trigger per shot.
Let's loose one round. Yeah.
Unlike select fire, which would give you an automatic setting, which means you pull the trigger and it just keeps firing until it's empty.
I think now this is AR-15, which is like an M4, but the M16, I believe, has a three shots. Select fire, so you have single fire, 3-round burst.
3-round burst and fully automatic.
Yeah, which is really the only way you can hit something with like an M16.
Yeah.
The 3-round burst, you can do it, but fully automatic, it's like a garden hose.
Spray and pray. So the term comes up, spray and pray. But the when you combine it with the clothing style, the style of the AR-15 becomes militaristic. Like in most cases, I say the AR is an AR. It looks the way it does. Most gun owners who have ARs customize theirs heavily. I've seen ARs that have wooden stocks.
You can make them look like
they're beautiful.
You can make them look like it's not even an AR.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but when it looks like an AR, when it looks like an M16, then you combine it with the militaristic style of clothing, it becomes a militaristic style weapon. And when you're holding on a 1-point harness on your front, and you're walking around a riot zone with your hand, he was also wearing gloves,
right?
Which, okay, gloves for medical circumstances are great, but as any medical tell you, you put new gloves on don't just walk around wearing gloves.
Let me touch you with my hands.
My hands have been everywhere. But he's, there are images of him like with the gloves on and like holding the gun. Like his finger's not on the trigger, but he's holding it like this. Like he's at a tactical, almost like half ready stance. So all he just needs to do is boom, 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 and he's ready to fire.
What was that movie about the sniper? The famous, I think it was something Bradley.
Bradley Cooper?
Yeah, played the guy.
Chris, something.
Guys, I think we've been doing it wrong all these years. I think we need more bright color ARs. I think we need hot pink ARs. I think we need all kinds of things along those lines. Hold on one second. This reminds me of something I want to pull up for discussion on stream here. Hold on. Because I want to pull this up and get this website. So I'll just talk for a little bit a second while I'm looking for this thing. Yeah, I think we need more bright color ARs in our lives. I think we need to really make sure that we respond to this in a really sharp way. And so here's one of the ways that we can respond to this, people, because people have gone down this road before. So I'd like to introduce you all, assuming you haven't seen it before. Hold on, I have to undo this. I have to redo this. Hold on. So I have to stop screen, share screen, share tab. This one, no. This one, yes. Okay, great. Share ad, great. So here's an example of what you can do. Here's an example of what you can do to help everyone in your lives. So you can get the Hello Kitty AR-15. Evil black rifle meets cute and cuddly. This is one of the many options that's available to you that would be approved by these people. You can have the Hello Kitty AR-15 and be really, really excited. So this blog, as it points out, so the so-called assault weapons ban as such has now expired. And the one still in place in states like California seek to ban rifles that our misguided legislature feel have no purpose in civilian hands. They identify evil features that can be used to generally classify these military-style weapons in sweeping terms. Of these features, such as plastic pistol grips, barrel shrouds, and bayonet lugs, have absolutely nothing to do with firearm potential lethality in the real world and are merely cosmetic features. After all, it really doesn't matter what color a firearm is if it's the same ammunition, right? Well, in the spirit of the California assault weapons ban, I decided to do my best to alleviate the fears of my fellow citizens and gun-banning legislature when I put together a new AR-15 for my wife. Below is the result of my painstaking work to transform the evil black rifle into the cute pink rifle, introducing the Hello Kitty AR-15. This is the kind of thing I think we should definitely get more into in the gun community. Then we wouldn't have this problem. The rifle is 100% legal in California because it's based on off-list lower receiver made by Stag Arms and has no evil features on it. Instead of a fixed stock, instead featuring a fixed stop instead of an evil collapsible stock, a muzzle brake in place of the vile flash hider, and a Monster Man grip instead of the heinous and malicious pistol grip. And then the Monster grip has been subsequently replaced with a Magpul MOE pistol grip, and the rifle has been converted into a fixed magazine rifle through the use of a bellet button. The C Products magazines look like a 30-round body, but is permanently modified to only allow 10 rounds. And then here are all the parts broken down to show you that this is not just, a Photoshop job. All the stuff has been, in fact, converted to the happy pink Hello Kitty AR-15. And then you have all those options for your needs. So I would recommend to everyone out there that the scary black rifle is too much. And I would suggest everyone out there do some Hello Kitty version. Maybe you want to look into tie-dye, though, because that seems to be the mental health approved way to go. But just want to make sure that all of you people knew that was, in fact, an option. And now your life is a little bit more complete. I'm happy to have provided this service to you.
was that the guy's
Chris
name?
Kyle,
Yeah, Chris,
I
yeah,
think
it was
you're
Chris Kyle.
right.
Yeah.
who apparently was not truthful. I did a video about him some time ago. He made up a lot of stuff. It's not really clear what he did, although he was, I think, a very good sniper. But in that movie, you see a lot of people holding the gun like that. Not so much him because he has a variety of weapons, but the people holding the M4, the M16.
American sniper. Right?
Yeah, there's lots of good ideas in the chat. The happy clouds. I love that idea, dude. That's a great idea, man. Yeah, why don't you pick your favorite Bob Ross painting? Why don't you pick your favorite Bob Ross painting and have your AR-15? You have your AR-15 colorized to resemble a Bob Ross painting with the happy little clouds and the happy little trees. I think that would be approved by these people. I love this idea. It doesn't have to be Hello Kitty. There's so many possibilities with bright and exciting colors. Bob Ross is a fantastic idea. So that's a good one in the chat. Yeah, go that route.
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah. He made claims that he climbed up in a stadium and shot people during a riot, and never happened. He made false statements about Jesse Ventura, saying he beat him up in a bar. It never happened. Yeah, so he had some issues there. But yeah, in that movie, you can see a lot of people holding a weapon like that.
Yeah.
Right? They're ready for people to jump out. And,
right.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a point at which it could be argued that the way he was holding himself, the way he was dressed, is provocative. Is going to provoke a.
It could be argued the way he was holding himself, the way he was dressed was provocative. It could be argued the way that she was standing, the way that she was smiling, the way that her eyes looked, the way that she was dressed was provocative. It's the same argument.
A reaction that could lead to violence in a situation where there are violent people. It could be argued that it did, but that's not the argument. But that would have been, to me, if I was a prosecutor, that would have been a secondary argument. That would have been like, he's a vigilante, and these are proof that he was a vigilante, but this also is provocation. So there's a double whammy on why you
It's
shouldn't
not
do self-defense
provocation.
to the jury. And let
Really,
them decide.
as a prosecutor, you really would have gone with the provocation of she was wearing a short dress, he was wearing the tactical. Really? As a prosecutor, this is probably why you're not a prosecutor. Yeah.
Right.
Whether they believe that he was there for that purpose, to try and be a law enforcement agent, or whether he wasn't.
So let's look at the events. So we've established that he was there legally, but it was not a smart move. No. And I think a move not flattering to a pro-gun stance, in my opinion. He's not a good representative of a responsible gun owner.
No.
You know, if somebody was pro-gun, I like to see guns protected for future generations. His behavior's not helping. He's not.
Is his behavior somehow unique or different from everyone else there with a gun that night or not? That's a point you're not clarifying. Is Kyle Rittenhouse in his behavior somehow unique or special or somehow singularly not a good representative for Second Amendment? I mean, that's a possible proposition, I suppose. Maybe Kyle Rittenhouse, I mean, at least arguably from these people's view, I don't know what they think, but maybe at least from some theoretical frame, Kyle Rittenhouse was doing something that was more provocative than everyone else there with a firearm that night. Is that the case? Or was literally everyone else with a firearm, open carrying, provocative? And you say you support the Second Amendment. What was special about Kyle Rittenhouse vis-a-vis everyone else who was doing roughly the same thing? Again, I'm open for this argument because it's basically the parallel to what the prosecution was trying to do, right? The situation is general. The situation in general is the same situation and in the specific. And I don't say, well, that doesn't work. What matters is the specific, right? So the situation in general for people that were carrying firearms that night doesn't apply to Kyle Rittenhouse in the specific. I'm open to that argument. I'd just like to know what those things are that distinguishes Kyle Rittenhouse as a particularly distinct actor in this domain. I somehow don't think I'm going to get the answer to that question, though. By the way, for those of you who are currently watching, I'll take this opportunity to just give a bit of a promotion for the channel. For those 676 of you who are here, thank you very much. I want to announce Locals and Patreon. The links and descriptions are in the description box below. It is Uncivil Law, one word, uncivillaw.locals.com or patreon.com/uncivillaw. Locals is preferred. You can sign up and you'll get access to fun games and participation and other benefits. We're looking into the possibility of merchandise, but I have to figure out what the sales tax implications are, and I don't want to deal with that right now, so maybe later on the merchandise. But it's a good way to support the channel. It's a good way to help support alternative media So join Locals, uncivillaw.locals.com or patreon.com/uncivillaw. Again, Locals is preferred if you want to choose one of the two. And the benefits between the two will be the same. So just a reminder there. And also, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you haven't given a like, give a like. And do you notice how some people in the chat have these cool little icons by their names in the form of scales that are of different colors? Have you seen some of these people with the little scales by some of their names? And you might wonder yourself, how do I get a cool little scale by my name? Well, fret not, my friend. It is very easy. For the low, low price of 99 cents a month, literally the least Google will let me charge you, you too can get the cool little icon by your name and become an uncivilian. Like Blue here, for example. And if you become 99 cents, you get the cool little icon by your name. You become an uncivilian, and you get to extol your superior virtue by being a contributor to Uncivil Law and the growth of the channel. So make sure to do all the YouTube things. Now back to our regularly scheduled content.
Not part of the solution of that. Responsible, safe gun ownership is the answer, not running around a riot with a gun.
And having a teenager being the one that you're looking to, generally not a good idea. Teenagers make bad decisions.
No, he's no hero. He's no hero. And it worries me that now, like, I think this verdict was what had to happen, but it worries me the interpretation of the verdict will be, let's make him a hero for, like, the pro-gun movement. No, he's actually an example of what not to do.
Yeah. He's a don't do this. Don't do this. Even
okay. Apparently, we have additional firearms to share with the chat. This is another direction you could go. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it, but it is an option that's available to you, all you people looking for new design choices. It is the Happy Unicorn AR. Or Seahorse AR. This is another choice for your AR related needs. You can get the Seahorse Unicorn AR with the bridle and the face and the broken heart thing. Is that my pony, My Little Pony? It will, and you get also on the top these multiple color things on the rail, which I'm not sure what, if anything, those are, but you got the multiple color things here in pink with some stickers, and you got some stickers of rainbows and things on the magazine. So here's another little option for some of you guys who are looking for alternatives to the scary black rifle that you can use to be less provocative in your manner. This is an option that's also available to you. So make sure to check that out if you're looking for options that will be approved by the mental health panel people. Let's press on.
Technically, he had a friend who was over 18 purchase that AR for him. It's like he didn't even purchase it legally. That was part of the argument was that the prosecutor was trying to make. The Binger was trying to make. Hey, he didn't buy the gun legally. Like, it was a straw purchase. Like, somebody else bought the gun and gave it to him, and it wasn't like a gift. Mm-hmm. Like, which is a legal thing to do. If you know.
Okay, whether or not, first of all, Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't charged with it being made as a straw purchase. Dominic Black is being charged with it as a straw purchase, which incidentally I don't think it is, but Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't charged with that. So, I mean, he wasn't charged with purchasing it in an illegal manner. Now, was he? It wasn't a charge that was raised. So it was irrelevant. Also, it's probably not a straw purchase for very technical reasons. You know, because of the manner in which it was bought and the exact nature of it, it probably isn't a straw purpose. Not that Dominique Black and Kyle Rittenhouse knew the exact law, but, you know, again, you can luck yourself into compliance with the law, and you can get unlucky in compliance with the law. So even if you don't know the law, you can luck yourself into compliance. And, it, you know, at least on my impression, it seems like what they did was actually legal. It wasn't technically a straw purchase. So, you know, just... First of all, it probably wasn't technically a straw purchase. But even more to the point, even if it was, Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't charged with that. So what does it matter? Because it wasn't charged with that.
An adult wants to buy a gun for their kid. They perfectly can do that and give it to him. But it wasn't like his father bought it for him. It was he asked a friend to purchase this gun for him. And that's what
And
they
gave
were
him the
trying to say
money
was.
to do so.
Yeah, and that's what Binger was going to try and say was like that's what makes it illegal. That's why he shouldn't have had it. He shouldn't. It was illegal for him to have that. But
That was not the argument Binger was trying to make. Binger was not trying to argue it was illegal for him to have because he illegally purchased it. That was not what Binger was trying to argue. Binger was not trying to argue illegal purchase. He was trying to argue illegal possession, which are two completely different things. Right? Your ability to buy something and your ability to use something are different issues. They're different issues. Your ability to possess something and your ability to use something are different issues. Right? To just give an example of the difference between possession, to give an example of the difference between ownership, possession, and use, we can even look to the firearms issues, right? Ownership, possession, and use are all three different issues. You know, the ownership is one issue. Who was allowed to own it? Who was allowed to possess it? Who was allowed to use it? Under what circumstances? Different issues. So Binger was not, in fact, trying to argue it was illegal because of a legal purchase. He's trying to argue it was illegal possession, and the statute didn't work. So no, not so much on that one.
ultimately, the judge threw that charge out because the length of the barrel was what is important. It's not illegal for someone under the age of 18 to be in possession of a long-barreled rifle in Wisconsin for
Right.
hunting reasons, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
Not just because hunting reasons. See, this is such a misread of the statute. This is such a misread of the statute, and I don't know whether people are doing this deliberately or accidentally, because the statute is not the most clearly worded. So we'll give people the benefit of the doubt and assume that in some situations they're doing it without malice. But the statute provides a multitude of exceptions. One of the exceptions relates to hunting, and then one of the exceptions does not relate to hunting. So it's not merely hunting related. The statute, the master statute, the top line of the statute talks about illegal possession of a firearm by a person under 18. Right? So the statute itself deals with illegal possession of a firearm by a person under 18. Period, full stop. Like these are all the things that have to deal with that issue, right? It is not on the top level line dealing with hunting. Now, some of the specific parts of it deal with hunting, but that isn't to imply all the parts deal with hunting, which they don't. And even the part that Kyle was relevant to has parts of it that deal with hunting and parts that don't, because it's like an either or proposition. It's not illegal for a person under age 18 to have it for this reason, or this reason, or this reason, or this reason, or this reason, right? And some of those reasons relate to hunting and some don't. So to call it hunting related, that's not in the statute. It's not in the statute. Some of them are hunting and some of them aren't. The way it's written is written more broadly than that. So it's not just a hunting thing. Not the way it's written.
Like if that law didn't exist, then
Stephanie points out quite rightly, like, subscribe, share. We need to re-educate his 900,000 followers. Yes, that's right, my friend. The channel we're reviewing today has 900,000 followers and is giving not some great legal advice and legal analysis over here. So all the people should definitely like, subscribe, and share so that we can help re-educate the 900,000 people who are getting some bad legal analysis takes because these people don't quite understand the issues that are in play. So do that. Subscribe that. Do those things. Thanks, Stephanie, as always.
have a kid go out with their father hunting, and for many years that was how people got their food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he used the law intended for one thing to do something else.
Yeah,
right.
And Schroeder was not having it.
Right. So let's look at the first instance. So this was Joseph Rosenbaum, right? And the prosecutor, I talked about this. The prosecutor kind of tried to paint Rosenbaum as like a low-level criminal, right? Like he was not really doing anything that night. He set some stuff on fire, and I would have prosecuted him. But other than that felony prosecution, he was a nice guy. And then there was a confrontation at a gas station where I think he called him a little dog. This was what the prosecutor said. He's like a little dog, like barking away. This is like, you're a murder victim, right? Like, doesn't seem flattering, but
yeah.
It's kind of suggesting that because he was a shorter person, he wasn't dangerous, right? He failed to mention he had been in prison for most of his adult life. But, I guess this must have slipped his mind.
Yeah, he was trying to downplay that. And I think partially because it worked because telling the jury that Rosenbaum was a criminal it was prejudicial. Like, oh, he's a criminal, so why should we feel bad for him?
Right. Yeah.
Right. But
Which is also part of the reason we don't bring it in, right? We don't treat people differently based on we work under the premise that life is precious no matter who they are, right? And everyone's life is equally valuable. Another reason we don't let you bring it in, right? We don't let you bring it in either way. If Rosenbaum had been, in fact, a completely virtuous, wonderful person, we wouldn't let that be brought in either. First of all, because Kyle wouldn't know, so it can't go to his decision-making, because he wouldn't know that this is generally a virtuous, wonderful person. He can only rely on what he knows. So if Rosenbaum had been a virtuous, wonderful person, we wouldn't let that in either, because you can't rely on stuff you didn't know. And, right, so it doesn't matter if it's a nun or a priest or a multiple, repeat, forcible, child, prurient actor. But either way, we treat as all life is equally precious, even if the people themselves don't necessarily do so, because
we shouldn't be killing criminals either. That's a thing that I've had an issue with. Some people are like, well, cops shouldn't be killing innocent people. No, they shouldn't, but they shouldn't be killing bad people either. Like, they're not judge, jury, and executioner. And but it does prejudice. People do become prejudiced by that. Oh, he's a criminal. Their level of caring kind of goes down a little bit.
I think he was trying to get in front of the defense, which of course would make a big deal for Rosenbaum.
Like I said, if he'd gone with the vigilante side of it, he could have brought that up and had it work in his favor.
Maybe he could have tempered that a little
There's
bit.
no vigilante side. This is not a side. I wish they would stop making a side. It's like, oh, the prosecutor just didn't think about this. If the prosecutor had gone with Kyle Rittenhouse is a vigilante, right? If they had gone with this, because I'm super big brained over here, 460 degree, no scope kind of thing. If they had known what I know and just gone with Kyle Rittenhouse as a vigilante, then the very fact that Rittenhouse is this multiple repeat offender, felon, child, guy would actually really help the prosecutor. So the prosecutor should have been more than, the prosecutor can introduce that, by the way. There's nothing stopping them from introducing it as opposed to the defense. So, if the prosecutor really thought that, the fact that this guy had this deep-seated criminal record would somehow be useful to his, case, then he could probably bring that in. Oh, it's just that he didn't see my brilliance. If he had brought that in, then Kyle Rittenhouse was behaving as a vigilante, and he would have been guilty because being a vigilante is illegal and stuff and things. And no, just no.
But yeah,
He could have had it work in his favor that, oh yeah, Rosenbaum was a criminal. He was a bad guy. But he didn't deserve to be killed by a wannabe cop. Like, that would have been a more cogent argument than what he ended up with.
Finger should have accepted the fact that Rosenbaum and Huber are both criminals. Work with that.
Lean into it.
Yeah, exactly. So
lean into it, he says. Guy in the middle here with the outstandingly great advice. Oh, that would definitely work out well for the prosecutor. Let me tell you. Lean into it. Yes, you prosecutor, you're the one who screwed up by moving to exclude all that horrible evidence. Yeah, lean into it. Tell the jury all about it. Make sure to let them know exactly who Rosenbaum was and his massive criminal record. And just go with the idea, well, he was this massive criminal, but he didn't deserve to die. But, he's this massive repeat, child, engaging, forcible, engaging. Just lean into it. Lean into it, prosecutor. Can't believe you didn't go with that strategy. Holy shit.
So we know that Rosenbaum was having a bad time, right? So he went to prison originally for terrible offenses against children, multiple, like 4 or 5 or something.
Yeah.
Really bad stuff.
Yeah.
But interestingly, he served so much time because he kept getting in trouble in prison. It kept extending his stay, right? He gets out and he has all kinds of problems. I think he had a kid with somebody, and then I don't know what the story was exactly. He followed, I don't know if I'm thinking of Rosenbaum or Huber. One of them followed someone back. It might have been Huber. But either way, these different jobs.
This is 1.25. We're already at 1.25. We found 1.5 to be a little fast. So we're already at 1.25 for someone who had said, let's go to 1.25. You're already there. Sorry about that.
Iterations he goes through to end up in the hospital where he had, I guess, attempted to bring an end to his life. He still had the bag. He got out that day. He still had the bag from the
His
hospital.
belongings.
Right? He threw it after retrieving it at the gas station. Right? When he dropped it, he threw it at Rittenhouse when he was chasing him. But what caused him, if anything, to chase Kyle? That was debated heavily, right? Did Kyle point this weapon? Was Kyle trying to put out a fire? That's the big story, I think. Had a fire extinguisher, tried to put out a dumpster fire. Right. And Rosenbaum didn't like that because he was pro-fire, I guess. I don't know.
Well, allegedly he was an arsonist.
Yeah. He would have been convicted of it, I guess.
He would have been prosecuted for it, at least, if he'd lived.
I mean, you see video of Rosenbaum just egging on the ones that were armed, like all throughout the night, and saying stuff like, I think he said something like, just shoot me now or something like that. So he definitely had it out for the armed individuals, is what it seemed in the videos. And I think they called
Rosenbaum was definitely saying, shoot me.
There was a word that they used, but they're saying that he was like just out there, who's so like energetic or something, that he was just like really taunting people a lot. So it seemed like he just didn't want, he had something against maybe the people that were armed, is what it seemed, just from what those videos seemed to be showing. Yeah. So he had said before, and I think they just claimed this, I don't know that there's video of it, but he claimed before that he was going to kill Kyle, I think is what it is. There had been some kind of incident there.
I think Kyle said that he threatened him and other people.
Yeah.
Which, looking at the video you do have of Rosenbaum, I'm not really surprised.
Yeah.
Given, and this is what I thought as soon as I heard about it, given he was just coming out of the hospital from an attempt to,
right.
He had bipolar disorder.
And himself. And, knowing that he was, trying to provoke armed individuals, it's entirely possible he was actively trying to get somebody else to take him out.
Well, maybe he was trying to actively do that. And if he chose to engage in conduct that would lead to that outcome, then we would, in the case of a cop, we would call it suicide by cop, right? We have a term for it. So I guess this would be the equivalent for a civilian. So if that's what he was trying to do and he was behaving deliberately aggressively to encourage that outcome, then maybe that was his goal. But from all that really matters is what matters from Kyle's point of view, not what matters from Rosenbaum's point of view. Like if he was doing it deliberately for the purpose of invoking that response, well, either way, it doesn't really matter to Rittenhouse, because all he knows and all he can really rely on the fact is there's a threat to him. What does he care how intentional or purposeful or what his motive is? Doesn't really matter from Rittenhouse's point of view.
So he picks the weak one out of the herd,
right?
And he chases him down, and
he finally catches one who's by himself. Mm-hmm. Like, this one's armed, he's by himself. I'm going to run at him and provoke him physically, get him in an altercation, and that'll.
Yeah,
and he lets himself go. Like, that wouldn't surprise me if that was kind of the impulsive.
Where was he going?
Way.
Like,
that's what I was wondering.
You listen to Binger, right? Binger's like, well, he's not even close. You could fit an aircraft carrier. He didn't say that, but you could. There's all this space. He said he wasn't even an arm's length. I'm not sure he knows what arm's length means, because Rosenbaum's hand was almost on the gun. There wasn't any daylight there.
And
which I guess, strictly technically speaking, is arm's length. I mean, when it's on the gun, I guess that must be technically arm's length. So technically correct is the best kind of correct, right?
Kyle, in his testimony, said that he was afraid that he would grab the gun and take it from him and then use it against him.
Right. And the pathologist, I think, for the defense said that Rosenbaum's injuries were consistent with someone who had his hand on the barrel of the gun, I believe.
Yeah, it was kind of, Binger tried to say that it was not the right angle, like the way the bullet went in, but his hand was in front of the barrel, right? I mean, it wasn't like a mile away. It was right there when he got shot. It seems pretty clear he was trying to grab the end of the gun. But what was he going to do? Binger said, essentially kind of implied, that Rittenhouse should just let it play out. You had the strap, pull the gun back, keep running. Rosenbaum was literally trying to grab the gun. Is that a great idea to still be passive? I mean, I think you can make an argument that Rittenhouse was in fear for his life. Yeah. Unarmed or not, Rosenbaum was dangerous. He was a convicted felon. He had been dangerous at other times, committed other felonies, allegedly. And here he was trying to grab the guy's weapon, the kid's weapon.
Well, he had committed other felonies. He'd been in prison for them, so those are not, alleged.
I mean, that night.
Since he had gotten out of the hospital, there were some alleged other felonies that he had done. But I think that he was more likely to be a danger to himself. Like, I do think that he really was intent on getting someone else to end his life.
Yeah, I don't know how this works, but Kyle shot him 4 times, and so I get it. The heat of the moment, Kyle is potentially fearing for his life, and perhaps don't have total control over what you're doing at that point. So understandable, but I wonder if an argument could have been made, even for a lesser charge, of Kyle being able to do something different in that moment, like maybe not fire 4 times, like, is it still, and I'm not saying that this is actually an argument, like I'm no expert in this, so I don't know if it could actually fly, but, is it an argument that because he fired 4 times, is that still self-defense? In other words, could he have just fired 1 time and be like, oh, I get it, that makes sense. And sure, he may not have been in control of himself, that makes sense too. But I just, someone who was a better attorney perhaps could have made a different point, even for a lesser charge, about what Kyle was doing at that moment. I don't know if that could be true or not, but that's when I watch that video and I hear 4 shots. I know there was other commotion. There was a shot fired by someone else before it. Kyle didn't know it was in the bag. Okay. But I wonder if there was other details that could have been focused on in that.
No, not really. So he could have only fired 1 shot, and the 4 shots was excessive. So you're trying to argue the first shot is self-defense, but somewhere between 2 and 4, it stopped becoming self-defense, even though all 4 shots happened within the space of 3/4 of a second. Also, yeah, I mean, he was shooting as long as the threat continued to exist, and 4 shots. This argument is stupid. This argument is dumb. It's like, no, I don't think a better attorney could have argued, oh, it was that 4th shot, even though the previous 3 were justified, that 4th shot was unjustified because somewhere in the previous 3 he had stopped being a threat or something. No, I'm not really seeing that one, really.
To that point, there was a conversation I had with an attorney. This is many years ago now, so it might not be true, but in the state of Delaware, it was true for a time that if you only fired 1 shot, you could not claim self-defense because it showed an intent and aiming, which if you had the time to aim,
it showed you have control.
It showed you have control over the situation. It's not self-defense. You have to fire multiple shots. Alternatively, there are other states where the opposite is true. Sure. Like you said, if you fire more than 1 shot, that shows your intention is to kill, and not just to separate out from the situation. So it's not self-defense at that point, which it just shows that different states have different rules for the same thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm more in favor of the Delaware standard that I was told, because if you're really in a situation where things are going south and you're in fear for your life, just pull the trigger as many times as you can.
Look what happens in these police videos. I saw one not too long ago where I think it was in Maryland, where a suspect had a knife, and a police officer responded to it was an apartment complex, and he was maybe 50 feet away or so, and the guy just started full out running with the knife in his hand. It was a scary video to watch from a body camera perspective. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, you're just like on the edge of your seat, like, pull the trigger. Like you pull like 100 times. Seeing this, I think the guy fired 6 or 7 times, but it was very quick. Sure. And they all seemed very necessary. And the guy fell 3-4 feet from his body, mm-hmm. like with a knife sticking out. Yeah. In Delaware, I don't think there is a law specific to the number of times fired. At least I'm not aware of one now. But the training typically is 2 shots center mass, and then what they call precision shot to the head. That's how the police are trained. And the idea, even though a concealed carry holder is not a police officer, the idea is the same. You're using lethal force to end the confrontation, and that means
that is one way to train. You call it a box drill, or I think it's called Zimbabwe drill, where you do if you're practicing this, you can do 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, 1 to the head, 2 to the chest, in a square. So it goes by a couple different names. I don't know the degree to which the police practice this or not, but every self-defense class I've ever told you always tells you to shoot for center mass, because center mass is the biggest thing. Like trying to shoot for the head is a smaller target. And, even the police, and maybe especially the police, are not known for their precision accuracy when it comes to being able to engage somebody. I remember an incident in New York a couple years back where there was a report of a mass shooter, and like an hour later it was withdrawn because what it turned out to be was the police who were chasing him. Police were chasing this guy, shot 22 times, and hit him a total of 0 out of 22. So the police are not necessarily known for their super duper accuracy. Incident. So I don't know the degree to which the police are practicing or not. I mean, you'll do this in competition practice, but for self-defense purposes, as a basic pistol instructor, I would tell you to aim for center mass because you're trying to stop the threat, and center mass is the biggest thing. So this like goes with this idea of like just shoot them in the arms, just shoot them in the legs. It's like, no, I hate people who say that. It's like, just shoot them in the arms, just shoot them in the legs. First of all, you shouldn't be shooting anybody, period, unless your life is in danger. So, you shouldn't be shooting anyone to wound them. You should be shooting them to stop them. Second of all, the concept you're going to be able to hit, the legs or arms, is a concept that makes me chuckle. Because it's like, no, your adrenaline is going through the roof. Your ears are becoming constricted. Your eyes are becoming tunnel visioned. Your hands are shaking like crazy. You're going to be able to pull off this precision shot? No. And it's like, so no, you aim for center mass because that's the easiest way to stop the threat is center mass. So you can practice this if you're you like shooting pistols for practice. But I don't know that I would recommend that as a practice for self-defense purposes, personally.
Killing the person is the object, right? I mean, sad to say, that is the object. The whole idea of shooting in the knee, and that's just fantasy. That's a bad idea.
And it really is fantasy. It's movie stuff because the center of mass is the biggest target. It takes a lot of training to hit smaller targets. The knee is a fairly small target. Like my kneecap is about that big around.
And imagine the fear, like having a guy charge you with a knife.
Yeah.
I mean, you also have to account for jams. Like, you have to be ready to clear a jam. Like, you can't assume every time you pull the trigger, you're going to let one fly. You hope that's the case. But, I mean, semi-automatics, especially if they're not maintained correcly, they jam all the time. It's a scary, you're going to do what you got to do.
Even with a lot of training and stress management training, there's a great piece on a 2020 episode that came out very shortly after Breonna Taylor. That actually a close friend of mine is actually in that episode. She's a police officer in Maryland, and they were filming.
If someone says killing them was the goal, I honestly missed it. I honestly didn't hear it, or I would comment on it. So I might have missed that part. But yeah, killing someone is not the goal. Stopping the threat is the goal. And I believe every time I phrased it, I said is stopping the threat's the goal. It is not your goal to kill. Your goal is to stop the threat. And you should ideally call for help immediately afterwards to get this person help, because you're not trying to kill them. You're just trying to stop the threat. And get help for yourself too, because you're probably in shock at that point, to be quite honest. And remember, don't talk to the police. So this is good self-defense law 101, or it's good self-defense advice. All right. If it is at all possible, someone else other than you should make the 911 call. It really doesn't matter who it is. If there's like literally anyone else there, anyone else should make the 911 call. So if you're ever in a self-defense shooting, here's my recommendation. Point to somebody. First of all, holster your gun or put it back in your pocket or something. All right, because you don't want to seem like a threat anymore. So as soon as the incident is over, put the firearm in your pocket or in your holster or wherever it came from, right? Or put it somewhere, anywhere that's not in your hands, okay? Don't put it on a table or something, ideally, right? You want to put it on your person because someone else might pick it up and God knows what, right? So you don't want to put it on a table, ideally. You don't want to put it on the ground, ideally. You want to put it somewhere on your person, back in your holster, in a pocket, whatever, anywhere that's possible, So that's step one. Step two is you point to a specific person and be like, can you please call 911? Or just say, please call 911, please do it now. And you have to ask a specific person. Because if you just ask the crowd in general, it becomes diffusion of responsibility. So like, do you have a cell phone? Yes, call 911, do it right now. Please, right? And so it's not your voice on the phone, incidentally, is the reason you're doing this. So, if you have someone trusted, like a family member or something, that would be ideal. But if not, you pick like the most responsible person in the crowd. If you're in the store, pick the store owner. If you're on the street, pick whoever looks like the most reasonable, honest person amongst them. Just pick a person. Any person will be fine. Tell them to call 911. But someone needs to call 911 right away. it should ideally not be you, because you don't want your voice on the tape, right? Because of the whole don't talk to the police thing. But somebody has to call 911. So if it has to be you, it has to be you, because what you don't want to do is not get this guy help, right? You don't want to not talk to the police to the point of this guy suffering more than he has to, because getting him help shows your desire not to have him die, right? And the very fact that you directed someone, you say, hey, do you have a firearm? Do you have a cell phone? You called 911. The very fact that you directed that shows your intent for this guy to get help and your intent not for him to die, right? So someone needs to make that call, ideally not you. If you're the only one there, you have to make that call, and you better be really, really careful on what you say on that phone call. Really, really careful what you say on that phone call. You know, I feared for my life. I feared for my life, so I shot to stop, right? Never say I shot to kill. Never say I killed the guy, right? Don't say those things. Say I feared for my life. I shot to stop the threat. This guy needs help. If they ask, do you kill him? Just simply say no, even if you do, because strictly speaking, you don't, because you're not a doctor, right? You don't know. So simply say, I don't know. I just know that I had this guy. He was an imminent threat to my life. I feared for my life. I shot to stop the threat. He needs medical help, right? And then you can give like the address and place that occurs, right? A description of yourself, a description of the guy. But when it comes to what you did, if you're the one talking, this guy was a threat to me. If, as the case may be true, he pulled a knife / he pulled a gun on me / he had a gun, it was in his hand, whatever critical detail there. He had a crowbar. You know, he and his friends had just threatened to kill me, whatever. I was in fear for my life. I shot to stop the threat. He needs medical attention. I need medical attention because I'm in shock. So some version of these things are your guiding principles. Don't say killed. Don't say murdered. Don't say like those words, right? But someone needs to make that call. And then don't talk to the police when they show up. Ask for an ambulance for yourself. Say, I'm in shock. I need medical assistance. You know, I'm in shock. I can't talk right now. I need medical assistance. I can't talk without a lawyer. Please get me medical help. I want a lawyer. Please get me a lawyer. I can't talk without a lawyer. These phrases, I need medical help. I'm in shock. Always a good strategy, because you probably are. You know, and then I can't talk to you. Don't talk to police, whatever you do, for God's sake. Don't talk to police. Just say, I want a lawyer. I want to remain silent. Just keep saying, I want a lawyer. I want to remain silent. And repeating those words a lot. Just say those things, nothing more. I want a lawyer. I want to remain silent. Just keep repeating like a mantra. I want a lawyer. I want to remain silent. I want a lawyer. I want to remain silent, just a mantra. Just that, only that. Don't need to keep it more complicated. Right? So there is your sort of superficial advice, by the way, if you're ever in a self-defense situation. And you probably want to, like, you know, spend some more time on that other than the superficial stuff. But ideally, it shouldn't be you that makes the 911 call. But someone has to make that 911 call, and they have to do it right now. So if you're the only one there, it has to be you. But if there's literally anyone else who's competent, have them make the call so it's not your voice on the tape. This is good advice from Uncivil Law. What channel is this? W. Colony Bay? This is Uncivil Law. I'm a lawyer. I talk about law. And at the moment, we're critiquing a video that's talking about Kyle Rittenhouse's self-defense. But we're having a side discussion about things that relate to law, right? Basic principles of law. Like, those things. I'll call once I get home. No, someone needs to call like right now. You know, if you call when you get home, no, you need to call right now because the guy needs help right now. You know, yeah, so you got it. Yeah, ideally should not be you. Literally anyone else would be ideal. Anyways, let's go back to the film.
A training that's specifically designed to help officers make better decisions under stressful circumstances. Even with that kind of training, trying to aim at someone's knee when they're running straight at you Now, even if they're standing still, I mean, like RoboCop could like precision aim for a specific shot through a dress,
Get you the gun out of your hand, right?
right? But that's RoboCop, and it's fantasy.
Solarnus versus Texas. You must affirmatively state your right to remain silent or silence can be used against you. Not quite exactly correct on Solarnus versus Texas. Not exactly right. It wasn't that the silence was used against him. Is that the mere silence was not enough to invoke the right to remain silent. Because in the case of Solarnus versus Texas, because there's some misinformation in the chat, so I get to be a good legal educator and correct this chat a little bit, right? It wasn't that the silence was used against him. It was that when he later started talking, it was used against him. So in the case of Solarnus versus Texas, Solarnus just remained silent. And he remained silent for a fairly long, extended period of time. I don't remember what it was, but it was probably a couple hours, right? He just was silent. And then eventually he started talking. And the issue that came to the U.S. Supreme Court was, well, he invoked his right to remain silent by remaining silent. And the Supreme Court said, no, it's not enough. You actually have to say, I want to remain silent. So it's not that your silence will be used against you. So that's wrong. It's that the mere silence alone is not enough to invoke the right to remain silent. You actually have to affirmatively invoke it. And you have to say, I want to remain silent, which I know is a little weird that you have to speak in order to remain silent, but that's the law. So you have to affirmatively say it. Your silence cannot be used against you in any case. So if you just truly are silent forever, that can't be used against you. But if you want to invoke your right to remain silent, you actually have to say, I want to remain silent. So that's Solarnus versus Texas. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful.
A human being, even as good a shot as you might be, you'd have to be a really great trick shot in order to do it. There are some individuals out there who could do it. There's some individuals out there who do, especially like cowboy action shooters who do like speed shooting.
They could do it.
They could do it.
Yeah.
Like they could at 25 feet hit a 6 times a steel target about that big around from the hip, like just in like 3 seconds. Those guys could do it. But they spend like 8 hours a day for 20 years to get to that point where they can do that. Your police officers can't.
And your 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse probably couldn't either.
No, absolutely not.
No, I mean, generally, I'm not aware of any precedent where juries disfavor multiple shots unless you really go overboard. Like if he unloaded, I don't know what kind of size magazine, I'm assuming a 20-round magazine, one of the tubes, he got 21. If he fired all 21 rounds, that would be something to look at. But 4, I believe he fired all 4 in 2/3 of a second.
Yeah. I mean, it's that easy.
Yeah, I think he was just really, really afraid.
I do too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, after this, right, now this gets all murky again, looking at those grainy videos. Some people say the crowd was closing in. Other people say it was running away. The video I saw, it looked like the crowd was moving away a little bit, like they might have been scared. Mm-hmm. Other people approached to help Rosamond. Right. There's more to live with it.
I mean, you hear shotgun shots, especially 4 of them in rapid succession. There's going to be, I think there was a surging in both directions. So a bunch of people are like, oh God, there's gunshots, and they're running away. And then there are a bunch of people who were
This particular channel we're reviewing is called Belgrande Media, which is run by this guy, Dr. What's his name, that I tagged in chat. It's in the description, incidentally. So if you pop the description down, it tags the actual channel. So the guy who runs the channel, Dr. whatever his name is, has like 900,000 subscribers on his main channel. And then this channel has like 6,000 subscribers, but it's like the same guy. So this is actually coming from Belgrande Media. The actual name of it is in the channel description below, so you can watch that.
like, what the hell's going on over there, and searching forward. Mm-hmm. So depending on the angle of where you're standing, you might have seen primarily people running away or people running towards, when the truth is probably like there were some people coming towards, but many people running away.
Yeah, because the argument here is, Binger made, is that Kyle should have stayed there. No one was yelling, get him or beat him up.
Oh, I don't think that's true at all.
I think they were, and I think it's reasonable to believe that their behavior was unlawful and they would do that. So he called a friend, said something like, I shot somebody, and then he starts running for the police line, which wasn't actually that far away. And as he's doing this, there's a lot of people at this point now yelling, I think this is more established, get him, and other choice words.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why did you shoot him?
Right.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Many expletives.
Huber runs by Grosskreutz, right? So he runs by him. Grosskreutz sees this. Huber chases Rittenhouse down. I think on 2 occasions hits him with a skateboard. Mm-hmm. The last time.
That's true. There were 2 occasions.
Rittenhouse hit him with a bullet, and that was a better choice of weapon. Then
skateboard versus AR as far as weapon goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
I'd say that the AR wins the weapon battle. Although I do think the skateboard would win an extreme sports competition.
he had him there.
Depends
have
what
a-
your
Can't really
sport is.
ride on a
If they were
firearm.
going to be trying to do an ollie off, like trying to ollie off of something, then yeah, the skateboard would win out over the AR. But in a weapon contest,
Right.
yeah, the AR wins. It's kind of designed to be that. Skateboard's kind of not.
Yeah, not a great weapon. So I look at this as pretty clear. You know, he may have thought he was an active shooter, right? And I did a video where I said, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But the question standard in Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken, is reasonably, was it a reasonable belief, right? I don't think it was reasonable given the circumstances. Kyle wasn't shooting. He was running away. There wasn't really much reason to believe he was an active shooter. And how would you distinguish him from every other person who was running with a weapon? So, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He still believed, maybe unreasonably, but he believed he was going to be a hero. Right? He was going to be the guy that took out an active shooter with a skateboard.
I mean, if
Yeah, like we've made this argument before too, right? We can at least argue the point. Like maybe he is acting in self-defense, defense of others, citizens arrest, some combination of that. Maybe he's not. We could actually do the analysis, and he thinks at least it's perhaps unreasonable, which is a reasonable conclusion to come to, right? We've never really done the deep dive analysis about the whole thing, but it's at least an arguable point that Groskowitz or Huber had valid defense of others, citizens arrest kind of ideas. We could do the analysis. The thing is, it's just irrelevant as to Rittenhouse. It doesn't matter what conclusion we come to on the issue. So you can say that Groskowitz and Huber were acting validly in self-defense, defense of others, citizens arrest, some combination of that. They were righteous in their actions. It just doesn't impact the overall conclusion. Because as to Rittenhouse, we have to look at things from his point of view. So they're making a mistake. Or they seem to be making the mistake, where it's like, well, if we conclude that Huber or Groskowitz was acting righteously, it necessarily means that Rittenhouse was not acting righteously. And that's not true. Because what matters is what matters from Kyle's viewpoint. What did he know? What didn't he know? So the ability of what's going on in Groskowitz's head, or the ability of what's going on in Huber's head, or even the ability of what's going on in Rosenbaum's head, strictly speaking, is not relevant, because all that matters is what does Kyle know? What can he rely on? So it's not an either-or proposition. It's not like if they had self-defense, Kyle didn't. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
it's unclear how far away other people were from Kyle and Rosenbaum. So like if like these gunshots go off and Huber is coming around the corner, it just like turns around and that's where the shots came from. There's a dude on the ground dead and a guy with a gun. Mm. I think he has reason to believe active shooter. Like this just actively just happened.
I think he believed it, but was it reasonable and actionable? Like, is that a situation where you're so sure that, like, if he had a gun, could he have shot him? That would have been a bad shoot. Right? If Huber had a gun, shot Rittenhouse, that would have been, probably would have been tried for murder. Mm-hmm. You have to be very careful in a public situation with a gun because you don't know the backstory. Right? The best example that I've seen in recent times is, I think his name was Jared Loughner. He shot a Arizona senator. I think something like some type of psychosis, maybe schizophrenia, I don't remember. But his picture is very distinct. He's got the stare. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In that shooting, which I think happened in a supermarket, there was I think it was a Glock that Jared was using, and it was either misfired or ran out of ammo. And an older guy took the gun from Jared and pointed it back at him, probably not realizing it wouldn't fire. I don't know if it would have. Maybe he did clear it or whatever. Mm-hmm. There was a concealed carry holder who stumbled on that incident at that moment and reached into his pocket. I think he might have flicked the safety off. He had a 9mm. And he thought about it. He's like, you know what? I don't know what happened. Took his hand out. He was going to shoot the old guy. Mm. That guy was the hero.
Right.
So I look at it like, you're going to use a weapon in public or any force, you have to make sure you know the whole story. Because, mm-hmm. For all he knew, Rosenbaum attacked Rittenhouse and Rittenhouse was running away, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
That's why I say Huber believed it, but not reasonably so.
Yeah. I think he believed it, and that's why he went after him with a skateboard. Mm-hmm. But by the time Grosskreutz was there, like, Kyle's now shot 2 people. I think his belief that Kyle was an active shooter was much more reasonable.
I think he can make a better case, right? Because he saw Huber get shot, but he also saw Huber attack Rittenhouse first. Right? But either way, he comes up, he runs with a gun in his hand.
It's still also now like 2 people. Like there are 2 people shot now, right. and he's like, okay, so yeah, he attacked him, but that's still like there's a guy laying over there, and now he's down. Like
you can make a better case for an active shooter.
You can make a better case for his belief in active shooter. Right. Not that it's 100% reasonable, but it's more reasonable than Huber.
Yeah, so he runs up, his hands up, eventually puts his hands up. He's got his gun in his hand, the Glock. And it's really clear from the video. I mean, it was one of the more clear videos. He lowered his hands with the gun in it and pointed at Rittenhouse. Some people say in his direction. Either way, that's less lethal force. You're pointing a gun.
It looked like he was maybe trying to turn around or something because he was running towards him, and then he stopped. Like I think maybe once he realized Kyle was serious and like actually ready to get his gun up and whatever, and it looked like he was ready to turn around. So from what I saw in the video, it looked like it was a possibility that as he was lowering his hands to try to turn around, it pointed towards him, and it might have just been an unfortunate thing. Maybe he did intend to actually fire the pistol. I don't know, but either way, Grosskreutz was in a bad place because he's running towards the guy with the gun. He knew he had already shot other people, and whether he intended to shoot Kyle or
maybe didn't
not,
know that or not, we don't know.
his gun was pointed toward him, and the video of it, yeah, is clear.
He put himself in a bad spot. I think Gage Grosskreutz believed he was an active shooter, but again, I would say not reasonably so because he didn't have the whole story, and clearly he was confronting somebody who was not. I just can't get over how he ran up to somebody holding an AR. Mm-hmm. Like, not many people would do that. I don't think that's very smart.
Like, I'm sorry, if I was going to point my gun in his direction, I wouldn't be running up and then getting close. Like that's ridiculous. It's too. If I have a firearm and I think there's an active shooter, I'm going to stay as far back as I can when I announce myself with that weapon, and say, hey, put it down. If I'm trying to diffuse a situation, I don't have a permit to carry. I don't want one because, frankly, I don't have anywhere that I go that I would necessarily need one, and I really wouldn't feel comfortable carrying it, while I'm in session with people. And that's 90% of where I go. That's not my house, right? So, like, why would I carry it if I was just gonna have to leave it in my car? So I don't have it on me when I'm in with the client. So I don't see any reason to have one.
I think that's most people's argument in Delaware. Like, I can't bring it anywhere, really. Like, why?
It's such a small state.
Yeah, and it's the hassle you have to go through, from my understanding, to get one. It's like, is it worth it here? Especially with the laws as they are.
It depends on.
Well, that's a good argument for changing the laws in Delaware, and maybe NYSRPA versus Bruin will do that or not. We will see if the Supreme Court speaks, and maybe Delaware too will become liberated. We will find out.
You do have to take some classes, and there's some things you have to do and paperwork you have to fill out.
It's a pain. I have mine, and it's a pain to get because it's all this. You have to prove your moral character thing. It's actually maybe a little antiquated, and I wonder if the Supreme Court case will overturn it, right? Because it's kind of like New York's, where they give it to you based on some type of moral test that only they really know.
Guess what we're thinking, kind of thing.
But I think that the moral stuff notwithstanding, they can pull that out. They still make sure that you have a gun safety.
Oh yeah,
of course. Like, you have to take that. Like, no matter what. My dad had to take it, and he was a gun safety instructor for many years. He could show them like his certifications to be a gun safety instructor, but they were so like, doesn't matter. You got to take the course.
You have to take it.
Which was really funny when he took it. Him and his best friends was actually teaching it. And then after he got his license to carry, his best friend was like, hey, can you teach a couple of these classes for me? Because I got things I got to do. So yeah, he did. Funniest thing he did for that class was he showed up one day. It was midwinter. He showed up one day to the class wearing a big, heavy coat and asked the class at the very beginning, he's like, how many guns do you think I have on me right now? He had 17 on it at that point. 17 weapons on it. One of them was a BFR, which has like a 10-inch barrel. It's huge. Yeah. But he just wanted to show, like, you can conceal a number of different weapons on you. But yeah, like I said, I don't have a concealed carry permit. But if I happen to be in a situation where I believe that there was an active shooter, I think that I know that I wouldn't get close to them. And I would like to think that I would try to, maybe de-escalate, have my weapon ready. Be like, hey, I got a gun too. Don't lift yours up. Put it down on the ground, please. I don't think I would be that calm doing it, but.
You think you're going to have a discussion? You think you're going to have a discussion in a self-defense scenario? You think you're going to have enough time to say, hey, maybe you should put your gun down, or I'm going to shoot you, man? You think you're going to have time to have a discussion and a negotiation? What fantasy are you living in? I know you're a mental health professional, and you normally have clients, and you normally have time to have a discussion. But if you're in a self-defense situation, where do you think you're getting the time with? Have you reconsidered the possibility of not, raising the gun at me and shooting? Have you thought about not doing that? Where's this magic time coming from? It's a bit of a fantasy, it seems to me, man.
Well, it's all about knowledge.
I wouldn't run up to them and try and get within 10 feet and then go, oh, you know what, I got a gun.
Yeah, it's all about knowledge, and I don't think Gage knew. Right? Grosskreutz didn't know. And he ran up kind of like not knowing what to do, maybe. He's got the gun in his hand, and according to his testimony, he was worried about Kyle racking the slide operating the bolt, like pulling it
He
back.
said that he did, I think.
But he
Or
wouldn't
somebody
need to.
said that he did.
Kyle said he didn't. Yeah.
He wouldn't need to.
I didn't see him on the video doing that.
Well, I think Gage said that he did, that Kyle did.
Right. Gage said he
Right.
that he operated.
This is an interesting comment because I've seen stuff like this before too. And I don't know where this perception is coming from, but I'm completely sober. I've had no alcohol today. So I don't know where this perception is coming from. But I've seen people say that before, even when I'm sober. It's not the first time I've seen someone say that, like when I'm on Nick's channel or somewhere else where people think it's like, I think I've been drinking. So I'm not sure where that comes from. So I don't know what to say about that, except I'm totally 100% sober. So, okay.
The action, like almost like it was jammed. He's like, "I'm going to get you."
Getting ready for it. Yeah.
But the weapon didn't stovepipe. There's no other jam. Like it was operating fine. Why would he do that?
If he's got a standard magazine in there, 25 rounds, then he's only fired 5 at that point. There's no reason to.
I think he said 8, right? He claimed 8.
He total of 8.
Right.
After he shot it at.
This is
Rose
right,
Cruz.
right.
So it'd been before he fired at
7.
Rose Cruz. 7. He's fired 7 shots out of 25. No stovepipe. Like that would have been an obvious thing to be able to see. He didn't need to operate that bolt.
No.
I'm trying to picture like and I'm going to use the word excitement, not that it was a positive thing, but I'm trying to picture the level of excitement that occurs in a situation like that where there's riots and there's just people and it's dark and you're not really sure what's going on, and you hear shots and then you see someone running, and so in their minds maybe it was an active shooter and therefore someone to be stopped. And I imagine that not really thinking about much, I'm going to run into it and try to help, try to save someone, or maybe not. Maybe I'm just mad at this guy because I don't like this guy. Any number of things. But the fact of not thinking and just being in an environment like that where there's many people with guns, there's many things going on that you don't know the full extent of what actually is going on. You don't know who's the bad guy, who's the good guy. And the whole situation is just terrible. And because perhaps of that excitement of I'm going to do something impulsive and not really think about it first. And here I am in front of a guy with a gun. And here I am hitting someone thinking I'm doing something good. And maybe you could have stopped further situations, I don't know. But thinking I'm going to do something good when in reality this could turn out and did turn out really bad, right? With him getting killed. And it's a shame, right? But it's what they found themselves in. And obviously the answer is don't be out with rioters, maybe. Don't be out in situations like this, ideally. Of course, people are upset, and that's fair. But you're in a situation like that, and you're probably going to do impulsive things because you're in a crowd. Crowds do impulsive things. People do impulsive things. And not thinking about things is just a recipe for disaster. And it turns out things like this.
I don't think I've ever voiced it, but I think my rule number 2 for life. Rule number 1 is don't go to prison. I think rule number 2 in life is don't be around riots. just seems like a bad idea all around.
And rule number 3, of course, is don't eat stale cereal.
No, it's never go after the Maltese Falcon.
Okay, on the Maltese Falcon thing, what? But, whether or not it's wise or prudent to go to riots, which, we could have an interesting discussion over, I'm sure. But strictly speaking, it's legal for you to go to a riot as long as you're not participating in the riot. Now, whether or not you can distinguish that after the fact is a whole nother set of problems, right? But strictly speaking, by the letter of the law, if you go into a riot and you don't participate in the riot, you're not doing anything wrong. Of course, from a jury's perspective, if it ever came up, you're part of the riot. So it might be very difficult to distinguish your conduct. So, what's true in an abstract reality and what's true as a jury might perceive it based on a factual assessment, because, the jury's perception of reality may not quite comport with reality because maybe your actions are indistinguishable, even though, strictly speaking, by letter of law, you're doing something legal. So you probably want to be careful on that. But yeah, strictly speaking, you can go to a riot and not participate in the riot. So whether or not it was prudent or not for Rittenhouse, or wise or not for Rittenhouse to do that, is debatable. We can take note that the police weren't doing their job in large part because the mayor had instructed them not to. To paraphrase Baltimore's mayor, we're giving them room to burn, apparently. But, whether it's prudent or not for these common citizens to help try to defend their town from the rioters who are trying to burn everything to the ground is a judgment call. But then again, I guess if no one will do it, if no one stands up, then the town burns. So there's a debate to be had there, I guess.
That's rule number 3.
So the argument for the kind of pro-Rittenhouse people would be that you have a right to defend property, you have a right to be there. And I think this is about the distinction between what we're allowed to do and what's smart to do. It accomplishes nothing to go into a riot with a weapon.
I mean, you said gross crude.
It does help to deter people from assaulting you if you're protecting property. So I'm not sure it's strictly speaking correct to say it accomplishes nothing.
Went into that situation not knowing what he was doing. The same argument can be made about Kyle.
Mm-hmm. And everyone there.
Yeah. He went to Kenosha not knowing what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And the big problem is I think that he thought he knew what he was doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, he'd been in the Police Explorers, which is a organization that tries to teach young people what it's like to take a career in law enforcement. You know, tries to give them an idea of what training they'll need in order to become a police officer, and give them a taste of the type of physical activity that's needed that they do, and gives them some mentorship. And it's honestly a good program. But I think Kyle Rittenhouse, it became like super dedicated to that ideal, mm-hmm. that he was going to be either a cop someday or firefighter. He was going to be a first responder, high thrill seeker. Mm-hmm. I think both Huber's and Grosskreutz were also high thrill seekers.
Antisocial thrill seekers, yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily a high thrill seeker. This criticism of Kyle Rittenhouse, I do not quite understand. I don't quite understand this criticism. So police have this program called Police Explorers, which, as he says, is a program that give you a taste of what being a police officer might be like, to help you feel like whether or not this is a good career option for you, which sounds like a really good option, you know? But Kyle Rittenhouse was too into it. He was too into it, man. He was doing the program, and he experienced what it was like to be a police officer, and man, he just doubled down and tripled down. He wanted to be a police officer ever the more. The program didn't dissuade him. He just wanted to continue to get more training. And he also thought about being an EMT, and he also thought about being a firefighter, thought about being some kind of first responder. He was doing these programs, and man, he wasn't dissuaded. He was doubling and tripling down, becoming more and more investigated in his plan to figure out how to be a first responder. How dare he? How dare he engage with these programs that are designed to figure out if this is the right career for you, and him to say, yep, this is the right career for me. I want to explore it ever the more. How dare he? How dare Kyle Rittenhouse? What kind of criticism is this, man?
Jumping towards danger. Everyone else is running away because you know, I'll be honest, my first thought if it's an active shooter is where can I hide? Mm-hmm. Right? And that's the training that most people get. I was a security guard. I was a licensed security guard for a while. I didn't have a license with firearm, but I was a licensed security guard, and we went through active shooter training. And the active shooter training for security guards is find a room, close the door, lock it. Yep. Try and get as many people in the nearby area into that same room as possible, as quickly as possible. Then close the door, lock it, everybody get low.
Okay. One, I'm not sure that's necessarily the best plan in response to a threat profile. I don't know whether or not that's the best answer or not. It's debatable. But whether or not the best answer is to get everyone into a room and close the door and lay low, I suppose that's an option. Whether or not it's the best option is debatable. But I guess the Police Explorers program is not for you. So is this coming from a position of envy? Is it coming from a position of, I wish I had that level of bravery and courage, which I clearly don't? And, you know, no fault to him for recognizing he doesn't have it. You know, I'm not going to criticize the man. I'm not going to criticize the man for not having it and recognizing he doesn't have it. He says, it's just not in my personality. You know, being self-aware is okay. Being self-aware is okay, and be realize I am not that guy. I am not the guy for that job, because my first instinct is to run into the cupboard and hide. You know, fair enough. He realizes that it's not for him. He doesn't have the personality. But I wonder if there's just a little bit of envy that's going on. It's like, Jesus, I wish I had it, and I just don't. It's just not in me. And this guy, he has it. He has it, and he's thrilled. He's doubling down, tripling down. He's a thrill seeker. Unlike me. I wonder if there's a position of, geez, I wish it was me, but it just isn't.
Because that's the smart thing to do.
Yeah, it's something we see in movies that you should run toward an active shooter with a skateboard or a gun.
Right. I mean, it's what all of our action heroes would do. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's the example for the high thrill seekers. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that drew Kyle to Kenosha. I think that for me, I dislike the reason he was there. I dislike the way he said that he was there. I think that he made it clear in an interview with the Daily Caller that he was there to act as a police. And with the police background, I think that that's why he was there. I think it would have been completely different if I'm here with my medical kit. Like,
He was
I'm
there
here
with his
to help
medical
those people.
kit.
I know a lot of people are getting injured. I'm here with my med kit to do that. The guns for self-protection, but my first priority is making sure other people get help they need.
How's that not what he was doing? How's that not literally what he was doing? He was there with his medical kit. It'd be like, oh, he was there to be a police officer, but maybe in some theoretical alternate reality, if Kyle Rittenhouse had been there with his medical kit and he was there to help people and was just saying, hey, this firearm is to protect me, but my primary reason is to protect people, that would be totally different in this alternate reality, which is completely divorced from our own. How's that not just what happened? He was there with his medical kit, screaming, anyone need help? Anyone need help? I'm a medic. I'm here to help. He was, in fact, treating people. How is this alternate, strange reality completely divorced from our own reality, not just our reality? He was there to be a policeman, not to be a medic that merely had a gun to protect himself. What are you talking about, man? Isn't that exactly what he was doing? Isn't that exactly why he was on the ground, unlike his friends who were on the rooftop? Because he was there to give medical assistance? Wasn't he, in fact, giving medical assistance to people? Isn't that a thing he was doing? And he was just saying, I was here to protect me. How's that not exactly what was going on in reality? What movie were you watching?
I'd had way more sympathy for him, and I would have way more of a stance of it's completely self-defense if that had been his stated goal. But it wasn't. The med kit, he did mention the med kit, but it was the last thing he said, and it was kind of the attack on. He's like, oh, I got this gun for protection. Oh, and I've got my med kit too.
Did he also say?
Oh, so the problem is he said it in the wrong order. Oh, okay. Okay, so it's the problem. The problem is when he was talking to the camera, he said it in the wrong order. He said it in the wrong order. The problem is he said, I have my gun for self-protection, and by the way, I have the med kit here to treat people. That's totally different than if he had said, I have the med kit here to treat people, and by the way, I have the gun for self-protection. Totally different things. Totally different things. The problem is he flipped the order. If he had said it the other way around, it would be completely different. But he said it the wrong way around. So we know it's there with nefarious intent. Oh, okay. Now I understand. Now I'm convinced.
In the trial, did he also say that he was an EMT at one point? Like he said that on the street?
I think so. I mean, he definitely had some EMT training.
Yeah, and I think his argument, if I'm not mistaken, was something like it's expedient. Like he knew he wasn't technically an EMT, but it's a faster way to explain what he was there for.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
He wasn't a certified, emergency medical tech, but he was with the fire. He was a cadet with Fire Academy, like an early cadet. I'm sure that he took CPR classes. I'm sure that he had first aid training. I'm sure that he went as far as he could with all of those things because that's prep work for becoming a first responder.
Mm-hmm.
But what he didn't have the training in was dealing with situations like he found himself in. And that's the problem. He didn't know what he was doing.
no, and he wasn't part of an organized effort like the military or the police, where you have, a police officer's best weapon usually is the radio. So, here you have a guy with just a gun and no official backup. Again, I think he was like the weak gazelle.
Yeah.
And Rosenbaum was like, I'm just going to chase this kid down, and he's going to shoot. He was right.
Okay. He was like the weak gazelle. So your argument is he's the weak gazelle, so Rosenbaum was deliberately targeting him because Kyle was weak, and then he defended himself. So that sounds suspiciously to my eye like self-defense. Again, are we seriously blaming the weak gazelle for being a weak gazelle? Hey, if that gazelle hadn't been so weak, man, if he hadn't been so tasty to the lions, man, it's all the gazelle's fault for being so tasty, not the lion's fault. Uh-huh. Sure.
And that led to Huber and to Grosskreutz both being shot.
And as Jeff said earlier, he shouldn't have been there. He should not have been in Kenosha that night. That's what it boils down to.
Would have been a lot easier to go with that route and not be charged with murder and have to go through the trial.
And not have people dead. potentially.
Yeah. Well, even just looking from himself, like his own,
Right.
like if he didn't care, still a big hassle. But yeah, he also has to live with the fact that he did kill two people.
And that's the big thing. Like, I have not heard anything about him getting counseling. I'm not saying he isn't getting counseling or therapy, but I haven't heard anything about him going to see a therapist. But yeah, he's going to have to live
I'm
through
pretty sure he's seeing a therapist. I'm pretty sure that came out. So I'm not sure what he's talking about.
the rest of his life, regardless of of anything, regardless of the outcome of the trial. He's going to have to live with the fact that he killed two people.
I imagine that because he's viewed as a hero by some, maybe many, I don't know, but at least by some, and he also won the trial, like he got acquitted of those things. I imagine that he is, in some ways, feeling pretty good right now. Like his lawyer had said, he's ready to move on with his life. If you feel like a hero and you got acquitted of things and you feel like I didn't do anything wrong, I was just defending myself, I imagine that it might be kind of riding that high pretty well right now. But it certainly
Feeling like a hero and feeling like you didn't do anything wrong are not necessarily the same proposition. Those are two different propositions. Feeling like I didn't do anything wrong, feeling like my actions were righteous, and feeling like I'm a hero are not the same thing. I'm not particularly fond of the fact that they're conflating the two. Like, to feel like, I didn't do anything wrong, I wasn't in the wrong, my acts were righteous, and to feel like I'm a hero are two different propositions. And they're conflating the two like they're the exact same thing. And if to feel one is to feel the other, which I feel like as mental health professionals is particularly disingenuous, because surely they know those are two different feelings and two different states of mind, which can be experienced by the same person. So a person could be feeling both those things at the same time, but they're not connected. It's like, so I don't know why they're conflating it when they're clearly different mental states, and saying to feel the one is to feel the other. That's very odd.
has a high chance of hitting him pretty hard. I killed two people for whatever reason, self-defense, that's what the court said. But nonetheless, you're right, Mike, he has to live with that, and he has to ultimately answer to himself, whatever he may or may not feel about that. He's not going to be in the news all the time. He's not going to be considered a hero. He's not going to have that kind of support forever. And at some point, he's going to have to answer to his own emotions, his own potential for some kind of trauma associated with that.
There is also the potential that his, what seemed to be his dream has been dashed. Like that just having been arrested would disqualify him for being a police officer.
Well, no, he's acquitted.
Having been arrested does not disqualify him from being a police officer, because he's been acquitted. So he's not guilty. He's innocent. He's innocent. Remember? Innocent till proven guilty. The proven guilty thing didn't happen. So what must be true? It must be true that he's innocent, because he wasn't proven guilty, remember? So, yeah, he can be a police officer, an EMT, or whatever. There's nothing precluding him. He has no criminal record, so, okay.
So it's gone. He could actually, I think, apply to have it expunged, the arrest record.
He can apply to have the arrest record expunged, but if he doesn't have it expunged, he can never be a cop. Because the arrest
I don't
stands.
think that's true. I mean, I couldn't swear to every jurisdiction in the country, but I don't think that merely being arrested disqualifies you from being a cop, particularly where you were found not guilty. I don't know the law in every jurisdiction, but I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that many, if not most of them, do not preclude you from being a cop merely because you were arrested. I think he's talking out of his ass on that one.
Regardless of the fact that he's acquitted. They can't consider when we went to trial, it was an arrest.
Yeah, but he's with an acquittal. Yeah, I don't see how he couldn't get that expunged.
Absolutely, yeah, he can get that expunged. But there's still going to be the question at any police academies that might have that question of, how can we trust you?
Mm-hmm. Well, and do you want to put yourself in that position again, even as a real cop, running out and I would think that would sour him on the whole shooting people thing.
I
think this Navy SEALs could hire him, man, because he's a crack shot, man. And he has a good character, man. I'm just saying, I think there might be a police force or two that might be interested in having Kyle Rittenhouse.
Would, but if it didn't, there's definitely some psychological reasoning for police academies not to bring him in.
Yeah.
So you went through this whole thing and you still really want to go out and be a beat cop.
Yeah. And the grief of the public reaction if you tried to hire him into a department, unless it was in a very conservative place. Right.
Now, firehouse, he might still be okay with, but as a police officer, I think he's not ever going to become a cop.
I can imagine some of the the very conservative politicians extending invitations to him to be like, hey, you're 18 now. Want to come join our police force?
Didn't somebody offer him to be an intern? I thought.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So I mean, stuff
That's a
like
better
that's
route.
already happening. Yeah, stuff like that's already happening. But I can imagine them saying, "Hey, come join our police force. You know, we need people that are going to stand up for the rights of people, or stand up for the right thing to do. You know, whatever they would say." So that's what I'm saying. I think he's kind of riding that.
He might be riding it right now, but as Dr. Ryan said, there's going to be a lot of grief for any police organization that would hire him as an officer. I mean, yeah, it might seem like great on paper in certain areas of the country, be like, hey, this is great. You know, we got Kyle Rittenhouse as an officer, but there's going to be so much blowback, so much very vocal blowback. There might be a large portion of the population, especially in that area, is like very supportive of it, but you're inviting controversy into your
And you're
police
inviting
force.
an antisocial challenger to like somebody to target him, right? Like somebody to finish what Rosenbaum and Huber tried to do. Like, you know, there's a like George Zimmerman, you know, kind of, I think, in a little precarious position, at least for a while, where I'm sure there was people who wanted to hurt him, right? So, you know, he was exonerated, I mean, he was acquitted, but you don't ever get rid of that threat. Right? There's always that notoriety.
And the first incident that would happen with him would go under the microscope.
Right back in the news.
The entire organization, the entire police force would go under the microscope. So I mean, it seems like a great idea now. Hey, yeah, come be an intern in our police force. But if he actually applied, I don't think he would get it. I think any police organization.
What if these people are speaking for themselves? Because they're speaking very hypothetically. It's like some people would object. Are those people you? Are those people you who would have a problem with this and would throw a hissy fit and object? Are you speaking about yourselves in this sentence? Because I have a sneaking suspicion you're talking about yourselves. It's like he'd have a problem because I'd have a problem with it. Seems like that to me. You can do better than watch these idiots, but we are required. Well, not we're required, but we are going to try to deal with people who are giving bad information and trying to lay out some bad stuff and be like, you know, this isn't great. This was Stephanie's suggestion, so, you know, Stephanie makes great suggestions, so, you know, we respond to the stupid because, you know, we need to bring the stupid out and expose the stupid and be like, you know, this doesn't quite make sense, this doesn't quite flow and stuff like that. Stephanie is a great mom. She helps me with the stories. She was a really big help to me yesterday trying to find a lot of stories for our batch record that were really good, including the one that's going to really be interesting when we edit it and release it. The story of the female webcam model. Story of the female webcam model who decided to perform certain acts on her sensitive parts with a loaded 9mm. Hilarity ensues. So stories like that we are looking forward to releasing in the near future, man. Let's continue on with this.
Hiring managers would be like,
just search his name. Oh,
so, that Kyle Rittenhouse. He was acquitted. Yeah, but
yeah. I could see a lot of hesitancy for him working really anywhere. He's gonna have a tough time. Yeah. He's 18 now. He probably views this as an immature mind, like a victory. Like, oh, they said I'm not guilty, therefore I'm not guilty. Yeah, that's definitely the part that keeps you out of prison for life. But there's the emotional toll of it'll come later, maybe, when he realizes he did kill 2 people.
I mean, there was a point, I believe, that he said he was questioning. He's like, "Why is this happening? I did the right thing."
Yeah, I wouldn't call it the right thing.
I don't know if those are his exact words, but it was kind of the gist of what he said in one of those interviews after he was released on bond. Was kind of like, I don't know why why it's going to trial, because I did the right thing. Like, I think he does believe that, and to an extent, he did.
Under the law,
he
exercised the right that he was allowed to. I don't know if he should have, but he was allowed to.
And I don't think like I said, I agree. He shouldn't have been there in the first place. I think that's his big mistake. But I mean, there were some other mistakes that he made that, you know, as there are some areas where I disagree with Judge Schroeder, some decisions he made in the courthouse. And it definitely seemed like he was kind of really leaning heavily towards Rittenhouse, like treating him like, oh, this is my grandson. And that showed a little bit of bias on his part. But there were some other things where I'm like, yeah, that should have been left out.
It was a bad case.
So you're disagreeing with Judge Schroeder, and I'm sure you're disagreeing with Judge Schroeder for particularly good jurisprudential reasons, right? You know the jurisprudence, and you are disagreeing with him, surely, because you know the law and you've considered the issues, and you have, using your expert knowledge of law, simply come to the conclusion, as I sometimes do, that the judge made a mistake. You know, I sometimes reach those conclusions, and so you are like me. You are just incredibly legally informed, and you've considered the jurisprudence and considered the law and looked at it and said to yourself, you know what, I think Judge Schroeder just missed this one. Surely that's what's happening with your mental health background. Your knowledge of the jurisprudence runs deep and wide, and you're just having a difference of opinion with the judge, as we on the LawTube panel sometimes have a disagreement with each other. As, for example, we're currently having a disagreement, which is very professional and very polite. So, you know, on this whole shooting in Texas that just happened with this person, and, you know, with the Chad shooting, as I guess we're calling it. You know, we have a difference of opinion, but it's all professional. And you're in that same vein, right? You're a well-informed professional talking to other professionals, and just be like, you know, just don't agree with the judge on this one because I've really thought through the jurisprudence. Surely that must be what's happening.
Case. I think judges have trouble restraining themselves when they know the answer.
Mm-hmm. Like the
judges have trouble restraining themselves when they know the answer. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's probably true.
One of the big things, and this was what got so many people reinforced in the racist narrative, was that there's a photograph of Kyle Rittenhouse with avowed Proud Boys members, which Proud Boys are a racist organization giving the OK sign, which has been subsumed supposedly by racist organizations, white supremacists. I don't know if OK has always been a sign that I've used to mean okay.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that any group can just take something and make it bad. I don't think that's a real thing. But I mean, obviously, there's a cultural element.
I mean, the Nazis took the swastika and made it bad. The swastika was a symbol of good luck for thousands of years before the Nazis got a hold of it. Now, don't put swastikas on things.
Well, how about the Hitler mustache?
Yeah.
That's gone.
That was a style. I mean, Charlie Chaplin had that same mustache, but nope.
You can't use that now.
Do not do that now. And the funny thing is, Hitler actually, at one point, had a really big handlebar mustache that he was really proud of. Then in World War I, this is way before. And in World War I, he was in World War I, and his commanding officer said, "Shave that mustache." And he goes, "No." And he's like, "You're going to want to shave it." And he refused. And then I believe the story is that he, the first time he went to fire his rifle, it got caught in the mechanism. And he decided to shave it off, but he didn't want to go with no mustache, so he just shaved the sides. And then that kind of became his signature look after that. I think it's funny to think of him with his mustache caught in the slot, just because that little bit of pain is schadenfreude against somebody who deserves it. But
I believe he was a corporal in the German army, right? And he somehow rose up. That's a good case to cover someday. A terrible individual. And a terrible set of circumstances that allowed him to rise to power.
Yeah, but there are definitely some symbols that become inextricably linked to bad things. The swastika absolutely now has been tainted forever. I don't think there's any way you could say, this swastika actually can be brought back. There's no taking it back from the Nazis.
There's no reintegration program for certain symbols that get taken over.
There's not. The Confederate flag is now inextricably linked with racism in the United States. White hoods also.
Right.
There was a time when they were fashionable for no reason, but the KKK kind of ruined that.
I remember the Dukes of Hazzard had a.
They had the General Lee, the name of the car, had the Confederate flag painted on the top of it.
Yeah.
But and supposedly in the last couple of years, I've been hearing that white supremacists are using like OK as a symbol to represent racism and their white supremacy. But I've 40 years on this earth, and it was 2 years ago when I heard that they were doing that, and I've always just used it to go, okay, sure, that's fine. But the picture of Rittenhouse is him doing this, being surrounded by Proud Boys, and like the Binger wanted to introduce that as evidence into the trial, and Schroeder was like, no.
It was 4 months after the fact.
It's prejudicial. It's after the fact. And the defense attorneys were like, you prosecutors scoured through Rittenhouse's social media and couldn't find anything else related to white supremacy or racism, anything like that. Don't bring this in. There was a bigger argument for Schroeder's decision not to let the CVS video in was a good call given what Binger brought to hand. I think it could have been entered if he'd gone with the vigilante thing, because he could have argued for it.
He keeps bringing this up. If he had gone with the vigilante thing. The man doesn't know what he's talking about. He hasn't thought through the issues. He's like, oh, the prosecutor just needed to go with the vigilante thing. Every time he says it, I feel like the lawyer in me dies a little bit more inside. This is because, bring these stooges before the law panel. Yeah. $4.99 from Sarsnak. Exhausted by hearing mediocre minds who think they're profound. Am I old or cranky? Is it really this bad? I don't know. I'm having some issues here at this point. It's becoming a lot. $10 from Topo Musical. This is just because you have to listen to the vigilante argument again. Yeah, it's like, oh, they should have just gone with the vigilante. It would have been to the state's advantage. It would have been the state's advantage to bring in all that evidence about how Rosenbaum was a multiple-time sex person with forcible actions on children, and that would have been good for them to bring in to show that he was trying to be this vigilante and stuff and things. And if the prosecutor had just gone with the vigilante thing, I would think it would have been better for him to go with the vigilante thing. Oh, please, middle guy, can you tell us more about the vigilante thing? Can you please tell us more about how it'd been really, really good for the prosecutor to go with that theory of the vigilante thing and how he's being a vigilante and vigilante? Would you like to mention vigilante some more? Would you like to vigilante? Do you guys like vigilante? I have vigilante in your vigilante. Do you like vigilante? I got vigilante squared. It's nothing. It's 24/7 vigilante hour over here on Uncivil Law. Holy God.
It may not have an influence on the events of that night, but it shows a pattern of thinking, and that helps establish what his mindset was going into Kenosha. And that particular video is not a video that has Rittenhouse's face in it, but you do hear his voice. And the video is of some individuals coming out of ACVS after having broken into it.
I think Stephanie is right. I think the only way for this to make any sense at this point, is to have a vigilante drinking game. This should be fun. Let's see how long this lasts. So I'll do a shot every time someone on this panel says the word vigilante, and we'll see how long it lasts before I have to sign off. This should go over super duper well. Super well. This should just go really, really great. Hold on, okay. Stephanie says no. Stephanie says this is a bad plan. Stephanie says no, this is a bad plan. Stephanie, as always, is probably right. Because this is a bad plan. Okay, we won't do the stupid thing, so that okay, that's fine. We won't do that.
Carrying loot. And you hear Rittenhouse's voice as he says, "Oh, I wish I had my AR right now. I'd throw some bullets at him." And that's why Schroeder was like, "No, that's prejudicial, and it doesn't pertain to the night in question." But again, if the tactic had been he's a vigilante, his mindset is to go out there and do this, it wouldn't have been as prejudicial. It would have shown, speaks to motive, speaks to why he was there in the first place.
Right, his general attitude. Yeah.
But Schroeder, rightfully, because that wasn't the tactic that was being taken, was like, no, it's prejudicial. Get it out of here.
You guys were talking about the hand sign, the okay thing. It made me think of people that do run sound for venues. So if you can't, you're too far away from someone, there's people up on stage and you have a sound person in the back, and you're trying to tell them that the sound is okay, you can't do a thumbs up because they're going to think that they want the sound turned up, right? So traditionally they do that, everything's okay. And so now every time I do that in that context, I'm like, wait, I think about it first. I'm like, no, this is, oh boy, what are we going to use now? Somebody's stolen that and ruined it for an industry that used it obviously professionally for good reasons. And it's I don't know who makes those choices. I guess it's just somebody, and then it just grows, and it's a shame that it's that things can be turned into bed like that, and it's just that's the way it is now.
Yeah, I don't see that as legitimate. I don't think people should be allowed to do that. But I think it just kind of ties in with the whole cancel culture and the whole nonsense of looking for secret reasons to hate people, which I think is the whole point of cancel culture, like mind reading, magical thinking, like, oh, I see you did one thing, so you must be a terrible, but people give into the nonsense because they don't want to deal with the grief, right? So it's almost like they're a little terrorist out there trying to enforce standards that don't have anything to do with anything, right? I mean, if it's a symbol that we've used for a long time, it has a purpose. Because somebody bad uses it now, we don't, and not giving them the power, right? It's just
This apparently, from what I just was like 5 seconds worth of internet research, Googling things.
So you're an expert.
Yeah, I'm an expert, absolutely. But apparently, what it seems is that the hand gesture originated amongst divers to denote I'm okay, or to ask the question, are you okay?
Yeah.
Because again, much like trying to give sound indications on a soundstage, underwater you can't hear.
You know what? I actually learned that at the Camden Aquarium not too long ago. They had this diver demonstration. Like 2 guys were diving, and they said that. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's like apparently that's where it originated to just say, hey, yeah, I'm okay.
so now they're just gonna have to drown.
And now, like,
No
because if they don't
symbols
wanna-
possible.
if they don't want to be seen as racist, as white supremacists, they're just gonna have to drown.
Yeah.
Can't do it anymore apparently. But yeah, that photo was completely prejudicial. Had nothing to do with it. And honestly,
I'll tell you what I will do. To honor the grift and all. To honor the grift, I'll do a shot if we hit 1,000 likes. How about that? I'll do a shot for every 1,000 likes on this video. We're up to 100. We're up to 850. So I'll do a shot for every 1,000 likes, and that'll be good for the grift. So for every 1,000 likes, we will do one shot, and that should be much more sustainable. So please like this video and all the rest of it. I hope you guys are enjoying it.
think that Kyle Rittenhouse, like, he didn't know who those people were. Like, he was just out and about, and somebody was like, hey, it's that kid. Hey, can we get a photo with you? And he's like, yeah, sure. They're like, throw up the okay sign. He's like, okay. Because he's thinking, okay. And then later finds out, oh, they were Proud Boys, and they got me to do a racist. Oh, man.
Yeah, he's not the smartest, right? No one's going to accuse him of being smart.
I don't think so. I don't think anybody's going to accuse him of being the biggest genius in the room. I don't think he's necessarily stupid, but I think that he's done a lot of stupid things, and that he generally is an 18-year-old kid who doesn't think things through.
Yeah, maybe, I think, if somebody's going to get a redeeming value out of this case, maybe you could make an argument that we should think about what types of weapons are available under what levels of supervision at young ages. Right? You have to be 21 to drink. Maybe, I'm not looking for further restrictions necessarily, but in one sense, I think 17 is too young for not to be supervised.
I think that there's an argument to be made for licensing to purchase and operate, just like we do with cars. Cars kill about the same amount of people as guns do every year in the United States. But
Are there assault cars?
No, I think it's something like 30,000. In 2015, which is where I got statistics from, there was like 30,000 gun deaths and like 33,000 car deaths.
Where the cars died.
No, where people died because
The stats are a little different, though, because the 33,000 car deaths of the 33,000 gun deaths, about 20,000 of them were self-harm. So it's a little bit different than with cars. Also, cars are not a constitutional right, so there's that.
of automobile collisions.
Did the guns kill the cars? I'm lost.
But my point is that we license people to own and operate, or to operate cars. I think that the same could be done for firearms. And I think that there's a system in place that could be used. It doesn't prohibit anyone from owning guns or operating them. It just means that you have to prove you can do so safely before you do it. So an examination of sorts. You have to get a license to use an amateur radio. And the FCC uses volunteer examiners. My dad and mom are actually volunteer examiners for amateur radio. They have people come out to their barn. I think it's like twice a month to take the tests. There's no reason why we couldn't do that with a licensing system with guns, which would actually streamline the background check thing way easier, because you pull out your license and scan the barcode with an app on a phone, and all it needs to do is give the person a red, yellow, or green.
Okay, so we're going to scan the thing with our phone on the barcode, and okay, that's not going to lead to a gun registration system in any way or something like that. Wow.
And it's like, hey, I can sell this gun to you. You're fine.
Yeah, there's a big debate over background checks for like gun shows and private sales. And I understand the strategy of the pro-gun community, which is don't give an inch. I get it, because once you give an inch, the opposition takes a mile. But it makes sense to me that if you want background checks, they should apply to every transfer. It seems reasonable, but this is how unreasonable the time we live in now is, like, where no one wants to give an inch.
Right.
They want to save everything for some future compromise, right, when they might need that capital. Okay, we'll give that up.
But then there's not going to be a compromise if nobody's willing to give it.
Well, if you have, if you truly have universal background checks, Let me tell you why it's a problem. All right, let me tell you what's a problem. If you truly want to have a universal background check, the only way to really do that is with a gun registry. That's the problem. Because let's suppose you come into possession of a gun. You're the police. You come into possession of a gun from someone, and you want to know how did they acquire that gun. If they obtained it through a gun dealer, fine. You have those papers. But if they didn't obtain it from if you didn't obtain it from a gun dealer, that means you have to have a record somewhere. You have to have some sort of record. So now you have a record for every firearm and every firearm transfer, which means you have a registration system because you have a record for every single gun every time it's transferred. That's the only way to make it work. And then, of course, even with a universal system, not every gun will be captured because some people will still transfer them illegally. So it will never be truly universal, but every gun that's transferred legally would have to have some paperwork or the equivalent behind it, and there have to be a trail every step of the way that tracks that gun in some sort of universal registration system. So that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem of why we're concerned about that.
An inch ever.
Yeah.
Well, then you have things like the 16 inches or less law, and as a 17-year-old, clearly it wasn't a good idea for him to have a gun, or just to think that he should, whatever. So having things like that and not having them updated and not understanding the full implications of what that could possibly mean, and then here's Kyle able to have the gun at 17 years old, irresponsible with it. And to your point, Dr. Grande, if somebody had given an inch there at some point, maybe something would have been different. Maybe not, I don't know. But it's certainly something that should be looked at because there's no reason why he should have been able to have that, and it was totally okay.
He said, I'm not for more restrictions on firearms. I'm for streamlining it and making it so that, one, it's a little bit easier. Last time I went to buy a gun, I had to wait like 3 days, not because of a waiting period, but because the background check system was...
It's down half the time.
It's down half the time. But if you have something that's just going to give you the DMV barcode, like they scanned the barcode at LabCorp this morning to make sure my license was valid.
Even if you have a concealed carry permit, you have to go through the background check.
Yeah.
Which
Depends on your state, incidentally. Some states you don't have to if you have a concealed carry permit.
Do a background check, but if you've already had the background check and it's clear and you have your license, you should be able to be like, hey, here it is. There's my gun owner operator license. Here you go. And then that means that anyone under the age of 18 has to be supervised while using a firearm. And I have no problem with that at all. But it's the idea, my whole idea is make sure that we're mandating safe operation and safety training for these weapons, because they are weapons. And we talk about that in the Rust video. Like, they're weapons. They're deadly. Like, no two ways about it. We need to find a way to try and make, if we're going to keep this gun culture that happens in the United States, we need to find a way to make it safe or safer.
Yeah. Well, the key is keeping the guns out of the hands of people who are impulsive. And impulsivity is not, strictly speaking, illegal. And that's a huge gap. And I feel the same way about cars. Talking about cars killing people, there's a lot of people that should not have a license. And it's ridiculous that it's treated like a right and not a privilege when it's technically a privilege. I mean, the point system is ridiculous. Right? I mean, just point after point, they go to like a remediation, in a little room in DMV, and then they can get points taken off. I would be much happier with
take a defensive driving course, get 2 extra points. Like, they're not extra points, but if you have points taken off of your license, they go back on immediately because if you take the defensive driving course. You know how many points I've lost on my license in my entire life? None. Not one.
I was really hopeful you'd say like a million. It's crazy.
No, I've never lost a single point. Like, I haven't been in an accident since I was 16 years old. Knocking on wood, making sure, like I always say that, but because I generally try to be a safe driver. I'm also generally trying to be a safe operator of firearms.
We have a lot of international viewers, and we talk about guns a lot in this, and or in the episodes.
They are responsible for many murders. I mean, they're used in many murders.
Right.
Not necessarily. The guns aren't responsible for them because the guns don't kill people, but they are used as a tool.
Right.
Many
Guns
murders.
don't kill people. I kill people. Right. We all know.
I wasn't saying I kill people. Jeff is the one who said I kill people. Like,
I just think of
this
Happy
guy
Gilmore,
over
of
there,
course.
like, I think.
Guy with the nail in his head, and guns don't. The shirt. Guns don't kill people. Like, But yeah, people have commented, and said,
how many basements do you have? How deep is your basement? Do you own a boat?
No comment. Yeah, but people have commented, and obviously in America, the gun culture is very different than most everywhere else in the world. And just the ability to own guns is very different than many places in the world. And so the argument, or not the argument, but just the comment about like, why do you guys love guns so much? And certainly it's not all Americans. I don't have any, and I don't have any problem with them necessarily, but I don't own any, and I'm okay with that. So it's certainly not everybody, but there are very vocal people in America who do genuinely love guns. And that's just where we're at, right? And so you can't, nobody's ever going to be successful with, and I don't really think well, I guess some people do, but nobody's ever going to be successful with no one in America should own guns. It's never going to fly with them. No one will ever do it.
Never going to happen.
So we're never going to get to that point. So of course now it becomes, how do we make things safer, better for the gun owner and the non-gun owner, for the general public, for people who are carrying guns, people who aren't, etc. So that's of course the conversation, and being able to compromise, being able to do things that make sense. That's where we should be headed, of course. But I can imagine though how tough it is for someone who has never been in a culture that is accepting of guns to hear about guns so much and be like, we don't have them. Like, why do you guys need them? Well, unfortunately, that's not the argument here. We do, and now we need to do something with that to make sure that it's the best that it possibly can be. So I've only ever lived in America, and I'm curious what it would be like in being raised in a place that doesn't have guns. Like, what's different there? What's the atmosphere like in a place like that? Delaware is, and where I'm from, Pennsylvania, is not so much about guns as maybe like Texas might be. I've never been to Texas.
In Texas, you get them in your Happy Meal.
So maybe I have.
I have not yet gotten a gun as part of my Happy Meal in Texas, I have to say. So I'm going to the wrong restaurants, man. Well, I'm going to give this another minute and see if we get back to Rittenhouse or something, because it seems like we've gone way off topic now. So unless they kind of come back to Rittenhouse and talk about that some more, I'm going to end the stream, because that's kind of why we're here. And I don't need to hear their pontifications about the finer points of gun control when their knowledge of the Second Amendment and its meaning is, probably not that great, because it's incredibly complex. So I think we might be done with the stream.
A bit more of an understanding of that, because I haven't been around in my whole life, rather than someone maybe in Texas or another state like that. But there's that's where we're at though, and they're never going away, right? In fact, I think people are only buying more guns as a result of those arguments. But it's interesting to hear the perspectives of those who have never been around them, and because their country is just that's not their culture.
Right. I mean, there are all sorts of arguments that are made about why we should get rid of guns and why we shouldn't have a gun culture. I mean, the fact is we do have a gun culture and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But there are things, there are some slogans that I've heard over the years that some of them really strike true. Like if guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. Like for a while I was like, well, that's kind of true. Like, yeah, the people like my dad, like he's a, get my guns out, prime for my cold dead hands. So like if they made guns illegal, he would suddenly become an outlaw for guns. And I'm like, but I was like, no, wait. What that really means is like people who are using guns illegally, they're already criminal action.
Right. Yeah.
They're not going to care that the gun is illegal. Many guns that are used in commission of crimes are already purchased illegally,
or stolen.
Mm-hmm. They're already in the hands of somebody who.
Okay, so Stephanie says the rest isn't about Kyle. So that's kind of like, I think we're kind of done here then, because we came for the stupid about Kyle, and I really don't care about their discussion about the finer points of gun control or not, because they don't understand the legal issues behind the Second Amendment. But I can talk to you a little bit about my thoughts about the Second Amendment, because it's in chat. Why not? We can talk a little bit about how I think about the Second Amendment. Not my first time talking about it. Some people in chat disagree with my reading, but I'll give you my reading for whatever it's worth. So the Second Amendment to the Constitution says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay. Now, a lot of people focus on the word shall not be infringed. It's like, well, it says shall not be infringed, so that means shall not be infringed. What's there to debate? And I'm like, well, the thing that you guys might be missing is what shall not be infringed, right? To say shall not be infringed doesn't help you unless you say what shall not be infringed, right? What is the thing that shall not be infringed? And it says, well, my right to own guns. It's like, no, it's not what the Constitution says. We have to read it more carefully. We have to read it like a lawyer, right? What shall not be infringed? The right to keep and bear arms. Okay. So now we have to have a discussion about what is the right to keep and bear arms. Now, the word the, as an article, it means it's referring to a specific antecedent. It's a specific antecedent. That's what the word the is. It's referring to a specific thing, not a general thing. So if I say I want a apple, any apple will do. If I say I want the apple, I'm referring to a specific apple. and not other apples. So if you give me a different apple, it's not the apple I wanted, no matter how similar it might be. I want that particular apple, the apple and no other, right? So what we have to really decide, in my view, is not what shall not be infringed means, although we can have a discussion about that too. What we really have to decide is what the means. What is the right to keep and bear arms? And understand that, now we have to suddenly go into common law, right? It's very much the same. It's very much the same as in the First Amendment, because the First Amendment talks about the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of press, right? So freedom of speech doesn't mean all speech. It refers to the freedom of speech, not all speech. What is the freedom of speech? Well, as I'm sure many of you guys know, it doesn't include such things as libel, defamation, slander, true threats, fighting words, and examples like that, right? Because those things were never thought to be part of the freedom. The freedom of speech does not include those things. Those things are excluded from the freedom of speech. They are not part of the freedom of speech because they're never understood to be part of that right. So they're not within the scope. So that's an example. So then for when it comes to the Second Amendment, we have to do a very similar historical analysis. We have to go through the English common law as it was developed and the American law as it existed up till 1789 when the Second Amendment was adopted, right? So we have to understand what the scope of the right is. So it doesn't necessarily include the right to have any arm you want or bear it in any manner you want, in any place you want, at any time you want. Shall not be infringed does not mean that your right to have guns. It does not mean your right to have all guns of all kinds, in all manners of bearing, in all places, at all times, right? It is not that. Whatever it is not that. So just because they're restricting or even potentially banning something does not mean the right has been infringed, because we first have to have a much more intelligent discussion about what the right is and what the exact contours of the right are, with all of its nuances and its meanings and its understandings. And so that's the part where I think a lot of the Second Amendment people trip up, is trying to understand exactly what the scope of this right was in those kinds of things. So that's sort of where I think you need to go. And in much the same way, as I said, when it comes to the First Amendment, like what do we mean by freedom of speech? What do we mean by the freedom of speech? We have to go through the English common law. What do we mean by the freedom of religion? Well, we have to go to the English common law. What do we mean by the freedom of assembly? Well, let's go to the English common law. What is the existing right that we are adopting? What are the scopes? What are the contours? What are the limitations? What are the boundaries of this thing that were understood as what things were in, what things were out? What were the boundaries of this thing that was designed? It's like the piece of land. What is the piece of land? What are its boundaries? What are its features? What are its places where it has inlets? And what's a place where it has, parts that bulge out? It's probably not just a perfect square. It has parts that leap out and parts that leap in, and it has this more nuanced, crazy line, maybe potentially. Like the piece of land, what are its boundaries? Right? So we have to, if we're doing that for a piece of land, we have to break out the surveyor, man. We have to break out the surveyor and figure out exactly what the boundaries are, and it might be all kinds of weird shapes. But the land has boundaries, no matter how weirdly shaped it is. It's not your right to the land is not the right to land, period. It's the right to the land as it exists, with all of its shapes and contours and exceptions, and incidentally, anything that might be riding along with the land. For example, easements that might be riding along with the land, or covenants that riding along with the land. This analogy is becoming increasingly irrelevant because some of these things don't exist in the Second Amendment circle. But it's just to show you that when you're talking about like the land, you have to have a much more nuanced discussion of exactly what we're talking about. When you're talking about the freedom of speech, you have to have a much more nuanced discussion of exactly what we're talking about. So for me, that's where things meet the road on the Second Amendment, is not in shall not be infringed, but rather instead what the right is and whatever its contours, its boundaries, its limitations. What does it include? What does it exclude? And how is the right understood? And, for that, you can go read any number of amicus briefs that were filed in Heller and McDonald, and for that matter, NYS RPA. One of the nice things about these cases of Heller, McDonald, and NYS RPA is that they have oodles and oodles of amicus briefs, and many of which are going into deep dive historical analysis, trying to describe what the Second Amendment includes and what it excludes from a variety of historical perspectives. So I think that's the part where people in the pro-Second Amendment sphere kind of lose the plot, is that they kind of think it necessarily means the right to have all guns for all purposes at all times, in all places, all locations, in all manners. And whatever it means, it certainly does not mean that any more than it means that when it comes to freedom of speech. So that's kind of how I think about it. In terms of what I think the dominant, although not necessarily exclusive, meaning of the Second Amendment is, what it seems to me, and it seems to me also that this is further validated by the Militia Act, is right. If you think about the Militia Act of 1789 or 1793 or whatever it was, right, defines all the militia as all the men between 17 and 45 who are supposed to bring firearms from home in order to be part of the militia, right? The firearms they brought, they had to bring themselves. It wasn't to be provided. And so it seems what the Militia Act is contemplating is that people are going to bring the firearms that they have, that they use on a somewhat regular everyday basis, right? So when the Second Amendment talks about a well-regulated militia being necessary to a secure state, well, what's the well-regulated militia? What does the militia look like? The Militia Act of 1793, at least it partially informs this, because it's 17 to 45-year-olds who will be bringing the firearms they have from home, the firearms that they're presumably familiar with, for hunting or self-defense or otherwise, the firearms that they might have an occasion to use on somewhat of a regular basis so they would have familiarity with it. So it seems like the right to keep and bear arms are those arms specifically that are most likely to be used and kept for what you might consider ordinary domestic purposes. So firearms that would be used typically for hunting or typically for self-defense or typically things of that nature. So it seems to presumably contemplate pistols, shotguns, and rifles as the primary firearms, because presumably those would be the ones that people would be bringing into service because they would be the ones that they'd be most familiar with on a somewhat regular basis. The whole idea seems to be that as the church bell is ringing, people are bringing firearms they're already familiar with, so they don't have to be particularly trained or specially trained, that they're already competent in some loose sense with their use, so they can be pressed into immediate service. So the Second Amendment, particularly by reference to the militia aspect of the Second Amendment, appears to be contemplating those firearms that would be in ordinary, normal domestic use for ordinary, normal domestic purposes, and the extensions thereof. So it would be modern versions of modern pistols, modern shotguns, modern rifles seems to be the scope and contemplation of the Second Amendment, particularly with respect to the militia clause. The well-organized militia not only indicates a purpose of the Second Amendment, it also seems to indicate firearms that are suitable for that purpose, which also is a holding, incidentally, from United States versus Miller, which is a trash opinion, but nevertheless is an opinion of the Supreme Court that has to be given some due weight. So that's sort of what I think is contemplated. So I also think that the Second Amendment, when it talks about the right to keep and bear, is talking about an individual use. It's talking about one person. Again, if you think about it from the militia purpose, which is also baked into the Second Amendment and further validated by the Militia Act, you're talking about an individual, what an individual can use. You're not talking about anything an individual can't use. So you're talking about what an individual would have an ability to use on a somewhat regular basis, so they would be somewhat familiar with it on occasion that have the ability to use it. So again, you're thinking pistols, rifles, and shotguns. So for example, at least from my mind, talking about an atomic bomb is ridiculous. It's not an arm within the meaning of the Second Amendment. I know you can think of it as an arm within the meaning of, for example, an arm reduction treaty. So you can think of it an arm in that sense, but I don't think it's an arm within the sense of the Second Amendment. I don't think the Second Amendment contemplates that, because that wouldn't be something that would be within an ordinary, common, normal use of an ordinary, normal, common person for ordinary, common, normal purposes even today, let alone at the time. So talking about an atomic bomb is completely ridiculous. Or talking about a fighter plane, or talking about a tank. I mean, those are completely ridiculous. Even if they could be used by one person, they can't be maintained. They can't be really faithfully operated. So I think it's completely ridiculous. So I think, all those things, those examples, I think, are not within the scope and the meaning of the arms. Again, they might be within the scope of arms for some other statute. They might be within the scope of some other treaty, because every time the word is arms is used in some other law, it might have some other meaning, as that law might contemplate within its own terms. But whatever arms means within the scope of some other law does not necessarily implicate the Second Amendment. So I think that, while, nuclear weapons are obviously considered arms for the purposes of like an arms reduction treaty, they are not arms within the meaning of the Second Amendment. Because again, the right to keep and bear arms, the right is understood as it existed at the time, and we have to understand its fundamental purpose, which is informed by the Militia Clause, which extends to individual people using individual weapons for individual purposes with some individual familiarity. So therefore, pistol rifles and shotguns and their modern brethren are contemplated, and not, for example, tanks and atomic bombs. So that is my view of the Second Amendment based on my understanding of the historical analysis and what is going on. So that is sort of I tried to read up on this. I think I read every brief in Heller and McDonald. I haven't read any of the briefs in NYSRPA, but that is my view of the historical analysis. So, and I think what the Second Amendment is attempting to contemplate. So, and then also, of course, we have to have a side discussion about what does it mean to infringe that right, which is a whole other discussion. So what does it mean to infringe that right exactly? And that's a whole nother discussion that we can have. So, like, for example, is it necessarily infringing? And I'm not taking a position on this either way at the moment. I'm just asking the question for the sake of asking the question. So, but is it necessarily infringing to have, like, for example, a background check? Is that an infringement or not? And you could have a discussion about whether that qualifies as an infringement. And you could have a scope about what exactly does it mean to infringe the right? Is that an infringement or not? So, like, you could have discussions around that when it comes to regulations too, but that's a whole nother set of problems. So that's sort of my short, off-the-cuff Second Amendment analysis. Yeah, just wait until I tell Nick on you. Nick knows. Nick knows. This is not a surprise. Nick and I have a divergence of opinion. I can't speak to how well-informed his opinion is in terms of reading the briefs and things like that. So maybe his opinion as well as informed mine. But that's my considered legal opinion for whatever it's worth. So I think, respectfully disagree with Nick. And if one of you guys goes in the Nick chat and be like, well, Uncivil Law called you out, I'm going to be a little grumpy. Because it's like, I'm not calling him out. I just respectfully disagree with him. I've done my due diligence. I've done my research. And this is my considered legal opinion at this moment about what it means. It's like, I love people like this, man. I love people like this. Kimberly says, talk to Tiebeard, you're wrong about the history. Look, Kimberly, I don't know how to tell you this, okay? But like I've done my due diligence. I've done my analysis. That doesn't mean I know all the things. But I read every single brief in Heller and McDonald. When in law school, I wrote for my third constitution, which was completely optional. I wrote a paper on the right to keep and bear arms. I wrote a complete history of it for the analysis. So I think my view is fairly well informed, but other people can read the history differently. It's okay. There's a whole scope of people who have written amicus briefs, on this issue at the Supreme Court, and they don't agree with each other. That's just my considered opinion. Anyways, I see that we have 1,000 likes, so I have to go get a shot. So hold on 1 second. I'll be right back. Roosevelt Media says Heller is bad case law. This has been made clear over and over again. What the heck are you reading, man, to say Heller's bad case law? Where the heck are you coming up with that from? Christ. All right, guys. All right, guys. Let's get. I love this. I love this. I guess I won't be sending Uncivil Law any more super chats, man. I don't know what to tell you. I honest to God don't know what to tell you. If you're only gonna super chat me, if you agree with literally everything I say, man, this is not. I mean, we're gonna disagree, guys. I'm gonna disagree with other attorneys. I know it's amazing. Sometimes the attorneys don't all agree with each other, and it's not necessarily because one of us is acting in bad faith, right? Sometimes we just read the law differently. Sometimes we think about things a little bit differently. I know it's amazing, but if your basis for super chats are going to be, do I like literally all the things he says, man? Jesus Christ. Any case, tonight we are doing Four Roses Small Batch Select, and we're going to do a shot of that. It was your rude outburst about my comment, I guess. All right, guys. To you guys in the chat for 1,000 likes, thank you very much. Cheers to you. That's a good one. That's a good one. Roosevelt says he forgives me. Thanks. Cloud Duel says, I disagree with you, but I need to know your opinion on those terrible Torchy tacos. I think Torchy's is a little bit overrated. I like what Velvet does a little bit better, to be honest, in terms of their tacos. So I do think Torchy's is overrated. It's not bad, but it's overrated, is what I would say. Okay, let me just read all the super chats and see what we got going on in chat. Blue said, awesome live Uncivil. Thank you very much. The Cinnamon Queen asked why I took her away her wrench. I certainly didn't, so I don't know anything about that. I think Stephanie looked into that, though. $4.99 from Nathan Lawyer. They say if Kyle was black, he would have been convicted. Barnes say that McMichaels would have gone off if he was black. Weird. I don't know, man. I'm just looking at the law and trying to follow it through, man. $4.99 from Professor Chaos. When some media lies repeatedly, claiming 3 black guys were killed when it was 3 white guys, that's a major problem too. Agreed. Super chat from $5 from the Buzz CJC. These betas remind me of male versions of the whispering NPR cat ladies. You mean on SNL? That's hilarious. $5 from Mithrin Emrys. Man, Beard Guy is really straining to find some way to make Kyle guilty. He was a vigilante. He was acting as an unlicensed security officer. Yeah, he's certainly trying many, many things, and none of them are really, really working. $5 from Kyle Stark. Blue Shirt's solo Rittenhouse video was actually great. The middle guy is biased and talking out of his ass. It does seem that way, yes. $2 from Mr. Scott J87. How did you find these guys Serenity now? Stephanie recommended these guys to me, so it's all Stephanie's fault, but she's great. $5 from Wendy Blank. And I just threw my yarn ball at the screen. That guy needs a wet noodle upside his head. T-shirt and jeans so scary, eye roll. $2 from Super Mario Subpoena. Is he saying the clothes enhance Kyle's gun? $5 super chat from Stormcrow900. Well, shoot, at this rate, we should just mandate that all AR-15s muzzle devices are bright orange. Very cute. Super chat, $5 Canadian from Blue. I come in peace, Vulcan salute. Kurt, you rock those Law 2 panels. Peace to you, my brother. Super chat, $5 from Blue. You're right, Uncivilian Kurt. I just up-leveled my membership. Uncivilians rule, woman dancing. Well, thank you, Blue, for upping your membership. Super chat for $4.99. Ghost of Recon. Coming soon, Ghostie's tie-dye Cherokee pattern. $5 from Ghost of Recon. $5 from Park Dunbar. Do you know of the cop who shot a guy 40 times with 45 ACP to little effect? It happened in 2008. I do not know that story, no. Super chat, $5 from Mithrin Emrys. I want some of what Beard Guy is smoking. Maybe that'll help me understand the fantasy world he's living in. True. $5 from PZP. The police were following this guy's life rules. $5 from Blue. What about the cop that pepper sprayed Kyle when he was attempting to surrender right after the fact? Any comments? None in particular. $4.99 from Karsnak 2. Exhausted by hearing mediocre minds who think they are profound. Am I old or cranky, or is it really this bad? I think it was pretty much really this bad. $2 from Mr. Scott J87. Bring those stooges before the law panel, please. No, that's okay. I don't want to subject the rest of the law panel to this nonsense. $10 from Topo Musical. This is just because you have to listen to the vigilante argument again. I know. $5 Canadian dollars from Blue. An uncivilian shot for vigilantes. I think, although we didn't take a shot every time we heard the word vigilantes, because that would have been unbelievably excessive and disturbing, I think we should take a shot for the vigilantes because of how stupid it was, and I need to kill some brain cells. So here's a shot for all the vigilantes times in the chat, because it was, wow, it was a lot. Super chat for $15 from this old guy. This guy has 900,000 subs and still didn't know the OK sign was a 4chan joke because Nick doesn't share. $5 from the Tech Crisis. I love this guy's beard, but if he spent 5 minutes Googling, he would not be so ill-informed. You'd need more than 5 minutes of Googling, but still. $4.99 from Karsnak 2. Question. Do we have similar analysis for the right of people to peacefully assemble? Yes, we absolutely do. Of course we do. Yes, absolutely. The right must be understood as it was at the time, of course. $2 from Ace of Spades. Just wait until I tell Nick on you. That's okay, he knows. $9.99 from Karsnak 2. My philosophical limit to the Second Amendment is that arms must be a point-tangible weapon. If you cannot control what's damaged, I think there's an argument it's a threat to other citizens. That's a reasonable consideration, too. $4.99 from Jack of the Dead. All I heard was Nick knows, rude. Ha ha ha. Funny. $5 from Kimberly Moriarty. Even under your assumptions, warships, cannons, and machine guns were all privately owned at the time Second Amendment was passed. Yeah, I understand that they were privately owned in some cases. Whether or not the Second Amendment was speaking to that as well is a little bit less clear, because we're talking about the militia and what's suitable for malicious service, right? So what people would be bringing as the church bell rings. So I'm not quite sure, although I'm not necessarily opposed, but I don't think it's a quite solid fit. It's a colorable argument, but I don't think it's a quite solid fit. I think the fact that some people privately owned warships, cannon, machine guns, I think is a little bit, again, when you talk about Heller, it talks about in ordinary and common use. This is the language from Heller. And I think that roughly tracks more with the Second Amendment rather than these things that are a little bit more esoteric. Because I think, again, the idea is when the church bell rings, what are people likely to show up with? And I don't think they're likely to show up with the warships, cannon, and machine guns. Machine guns are a little bit more debatable. Not for least reasons. They're an extension of standard rifles, so you could fold them in that way. But I think as to warships, I think it's pretty hard for a person to bear a warship or a cannon. So I don't really think it's what the Second Amendment was trying to contemplate. But it's debatable. $5 Canadian from Blue. Uncivilian shot. $5 from Roosevelt Media News. I forgive you. $5 super chat from Cloud Duel 13. I disagree with you, but I need to know your opinion on those terrible torchy tacos. I wouldn't say they're terrible, but they're overrated. $5 from Doctrine. The difference of opinions makes this interesting. And exercises the brain don't stop being you. Well, thank you very much, Doctrine. I will continue to try. $5 from Toby Jean Almy. Laughing my ass off. The channel is named Uncivil. If I get anything less than uncivil behavior, I'll stop super chatting. Here's the $5 to counter on offset penalties. Thank you. $5 from Frosty Snowman. Has anyone really been far as decided to use even one to go to do more like? Is that a coherent sentence? Has anyone really been far even as decide to use even go want to do more like? There is no way that's a coherent sentence, so I'll simply say whatever. Whatever. $5 from Frosty Snowman. Oh, we read that one. $5 from Park Dunbar. You seem to have an educated opinion about the Second Amendment. I'd like to think so. I disagree on the conclusion. Have you thought about doing a stream with Colion Noir? He's a pro-Second Amendment lawyer. I think Colion Noir won't stoop himself to my level. but I wouldn't necessarily be opposed. And Cloud Duels, can you say DS9 is the greatest Star Trek series? I can. DS9 is the greatest Star Trek series. So that's the end of the Super Chats. And I hope you've been enjoying this stream. For the someone's drunk from 2 shots, man. I don't know about that, man. I don't know about that. That's a little bit unfair from 2 shots, but thanks anyway. If you've enjoyed this stream, please remember to give it a like. I've been here on stream for 4 hours for you guys. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And did you know for 99 cents a month, you too? Isn't Colian a lawyer? Yes, he is. And did you know for 99 cents a month, you too can become an uncivilian? Yes, you can. You can hit the join button. It would help become an uncivilian. All those things. It'll be great. Until later, my friends, I hope all is well. This is the end of the stream. Until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.